Chapter 413. Mu Bin's face was filled with excitement when he heard the imperial edict. He knelt on the ground with his hands flat and shouted, "Long live the emperor! King of Shiping, please get up." After reading the imperial edict, Wang Ji put on a more enthusiastic expression and carefully helped Mu Bin, who was kneeling on the ground. "Thank you, Lord Wang," Mu Bin said carefully. "You're too polite, King of Shiping. You'll be the first king of great Ming dynasty with a different surname. I'm afraid I'll need your help in many areas in the future," Wang Ji said deliberately. At the same time, he was also trying to be friendly. Mu Bin had the idea that one more friend meant one more path. Besides, he had to have an important official that he was on good terms with in Jingdo. Only then could information flow smoothly and make better and more correct decisions on certain matters. Now that he felt Wang Ji's enthusiasm, he replied politely, "You're too polite, Lord Wang. In fact, Marquis, I've always respected you, Lord Wang." Changing the title from Marquis to King meant that Mu Bin had accepted the title. Wang Ji, who was reading the imperial edict, could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He was worried that Mu Bin would not accept the imperial edict. If that was the case, it would be even more difficult to count on him to help in the Yunnan matter. Fortunately, Mu Bin accepted the edict gladly. Then, everything could be discussed. Well said, well said. We'll help each other in the future. Ha! Wang Ji smiled and took the opportunity to grab Mu Bin's arm. Then, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then they burst out laughing. Their relationship became much closer in an instant with this smile. When they talked later, they had fewer scruples. Taking this opportunity, Wang Ji finally told Mu Bin about his edict, including some analysis of Mu Bin's situation. "King of Shiping, to tell you the truth, I'm the one who proposed to be conferred the title of king. The reason why I did this is because you didn't show much enthusiasm in the matter of Yunnan, which has already disappointed His Majesty." Wang Ji spoke in a sincere and heartfelt manner. He even intentionally sighed. "Ah, things aren't like that. I do have some misgivings about the Yunnan matter, but overall I still did my best." When Mu Bin heard that his actions had caused Ingzong to be dissatisfied, his face was filled with fear as he tried to explain himself. Looking at Mu Bin's reaction, Wang Ji laughed in his heart. As expected, Mu Bin had his concerns. However, on the surface, he still analyzed the situation seriously. "King of Shiping, you don't have to say much. I can guess what you're worried about and who's behind it. Forgive me for saying something disrespectful, but you've made the wrong choice." "Wrong?" Mu Bin asked doubtfully. "Wrong. You are indeed wrong." Wang Ji nodded heavily. "Ingzong has always been on the throne, and the one in the north is just borrowing the power of others to rise to power. However, in terms of methods and strength, although the age difference is not that big, the actual difference is too great. For example, there were many old officials in the north who were still contacting the emperor, expressing that they had no choice but to lower their heads due to the circumstances. Once the emperor could lead the army to the north one day, they would definitely support each other from afar to show their loyalty. The emperor has been preparing for this. If it weren't for the chaos in Yunnan and Guangdong, this matter would have been done by now. Is there such a thing? Mu Bin said, as if this was the first time he heard about it. Of course there is. To tell you the truth, those people who are secretly contacting the emperor are all people with great power and military power. If it's possible, I'm afraid that once the emperor starts a rebellion, the one in the north will be captured without putting up a fight. I'm afraid that there won't be many soldiers left. Think about it. The emperor has been the emperor in the north for more than 10 years. How could he not arrange for people to be there? The emperor's methods are not something that we can guess or see through. At this time, Wang Ji praised Zhu Qijin with an unfathomable look. Hearing all this, Mu Bin couldn't help but nod. If what Wang Ji said was true, Ingzong's chances of winning were indeed higher. If that was the case, he would have to bet on it. Or rather, he should have a decision in his heart. What is a decision? When others have not made up their minds, You have already made up your mind and taken action. That is a decision. Otherwise, when the general trend is set, no matter what you do, it will be the icing on the cake. Now that Mu Bin was crowned as a prince with a different surname, he had already received practical benefits. If he didn't do anything, he was afraid that he would be laughed at by the world. At this moment, he made up his mind and said to Wang Ji, "Lord Wang, please rest assured. Please tell the emperor that this prince's sincerity has always been on this side. In a while, I will go and announce the general's camp and prepare to deal a heavy blow to the rebels in the territory and show the prestige of the great Ming Empire." Good. Seeing that Mu Bin had agreed so readily, Wang Ji was naturally excited. He laughed heartily and kept patting Mu Bin's arm. "Ping Shi Wang, your decisiveness really didn't disappoint people. It can be seen that you must be a person who can do great things. Your future is limitless. In the future, the Mu family will also have good fortune because of you. This prince is only loyal to the emperor. All this is what I should do." Since he made the final decision, Mu Bin's heart that had been wavering left and right was put down. At this moment, he only had one goal in his heart, and that was to be worthy of the emperor's trust. He would take the opportunity to stabilize the position of Ping Shi Wang and bring good fortune to the Mu family. Not long after, the army belonging to the Mu family moved. 100,000 troops were ready for battle, causing the entire Yunnan to be shaken. Everywhere was filled with murderous intent. Wang Ji's road was successful, but the other two roads were not so smooth. Although the envoys sent to the Miao family promised a lot of money, the opinions of the Miao family leaders were not unified. It was difficult to reach a conclusion in a short time. Although the envoys on the way to Jiaoji successfully met the old emperor of Jiaoji, King Li, in history this person died, but for the sake of the story he is still alive, still alive. Dear officials, please don't scold him as a prodigal son. Thank you for your understanding. The other party seemed to be satisfied with the so-called marriage alliance, but they had different opinions on which princess to marry. According to Zhu Qijin's arrangement, this time the other party was given the daughter of a foreign prince, who was temporarily conferred the title of princess. Although such a person also had the blood of the Zhu family, it was not very pure, and her status was not very high. King Li was well aware of this point. Since he wanted to marry, he naturally hoped to find a princess with a pure bloodline and noble status to be his wife. Thus, he put forward his own request. That was, the marriage was fine, but he had to marry the third princess of the Southern Ming Empire. The third princess of the Southern Ming Empire was Zhu Qijin's younger sister. During her birthday, Yang Qindong had even arranged a program for her. Because of her status, she was very noble. Later on, after Zhu Qijin's army was defeated, although Daizong Zhu Qiyu tried to persuade her to stay, she still followed Zhu Qijin to Nanjing. Because of this, the matter of finding Fu Ma was delayed. Now, she was a girl waiting to be married. Since Li knew about this matter, it was natural for him to have such a request. The other party wanted to marry the third princess, so the envoy did not dare to make a decision. He only said that he would return to the capital of the Southern Ming Empire and report to Daizong Yingzong. As if to put pressure on the other party, Li clamored for the envoy to quickly reply. Otherwise, he was not sure if he would send troops again in a fit of anger and occupy the entire Yunnan. At that time, it would be hard to avoid hurting the relationship between the two sides. The envoy was so scared that he ran out of the Jiaoji army's camp in a panic. He took a detour and headed straight for Nanjing. However, what he and everyone else did not expect was that the Security Bureau had already made arrangements to deal with this envoy. Not long after the envoy entered the Jiaoji army's camp, the assassination attempt was carried out. The envoy was completely unprepared and was killed, along with the dozens of people who followed him. Envoys being killed, this kind of thing usually did not happen. As the saying goes, even if two armies were at war, they would not kill the envoys. It was precisely because of this fixed way of thinking that no one would expect such a thing to happen. As a result, the envoy was only discovered after he disappeared for a few days. At that moment, rumors started to spread. It was said that King Li had Astingzong for 2 women. One was the most noble and pure-blooded 3rd princess, Princess Shangda, and the other was Zhu Qijin's current wife, Empress Qian. It was also said that the old king preferred married women. This news was naturally spread by the Security Bureau on purpose. Because the envoy was already dead, the truth of the matter could no longer be investigated. Once such rumors were heard, the news immediately spread to the capital of Nanjing. One could imagine how angry Zhu Qijin would be when he heard the news. Who knew how many tables he would overturn and how many things he would break because of this. The 3rd Princess Shangda was already his flesh and blood. They had the same father and mother. How could such a biological sister marry an old man who was almost 60 years old? If he really did that, how could he face his ancestors after 100 years? Not to mention, the other party even said that he wanted his empress. This was a blatant slap to his face. If it were any other man, they would not be able to accept it. Although it was popular in some places to send women to do errands, especially in Japan, this kind of thing could be said to be common. However, Lady Qian was the empress of a country. Similarly, she represented the face of a country. If Zhu Qijin really did that, he would not need to do anything else. The whole world would look down on him. Then, where would his imperial power be? Where would his dignity be? In his anger, Zhu Qijin unleashed a thunderous rage in the imperial court. I order Governor Wang Lai of Huguang, Administrative Secretary Yang Xinmin of Yunnan, and Governor Tongji Dongxing to immediately mobilize the army and attack Jiaoji together with King Shiping. I want him to pay the price for his arrogance and ignorance. Pay the price! The emperor was furious. Immediately, a eunuch went down to pass down the decree. However, all the officials in the imperial court knew that if Jiaoji was so easy to destroy, it would have been destroyed long ago. There would not have been Xuanzong, Zhu Zhangji's abandonment back then. Chapter 414. Thinking back to when Great Ming was just established, Zhu Di was really prosperous and sent troops to conquer Jiaoji, modern-day Vietnam. At that time, the one leading the troops was the late Duking Zhang Fu. With the strength of the Ming army, they defeated them and established Jiaoji province. However, as both sides were too far apart, many things were beyond their reach. In 1431 AD, Jiaoji province was abolished, and Li accepted the Ming dynasty title, becoming the king of Annan. This was a huge blow to the prestige of the central government toward the southwest chieftains. What happened after proved that the negative effects of Xian Da abandoning Jiaoji were long-term and fatal. This matter dealt a heavy blow to the Ming dynasty's international prestige in the western region and shook their suzerain status. Losing Annan meant losing the western region. This was something that even Zhu Zhangji did not expect. Since then, Annan had been harassing the border and invading the land. Finally, there was today's humiliation. Zhu Qijin was still angry as he left court. Beside him was eunuch Chao Jixiang, who looked like he wanted to say something. Chao Jixiang, what's the matter? Noticing the change in Chao Jixiang, Zhu Qijin stopped and asked with a frown, "Even if I die 1,000 times, I will not say anything. However, I am afraid that I will make the emperor angry." When Chao Jixiang heard Zhu Qijin's question, he knelt on the ground, his face filled with fear. "As long as it is for the good of the country and for me," Chao Jixiang can just say it directly, "I can forgive you." Zhu Qijin had a good impression of this eunuch, who seemed to be loyal and devoted to him. At least this eunuch was wholeheartedly loyal to him and did things wholeheartedly for him. He was much better than some officials who only knew how to fight for power and profit. He was also more reassuring. Hearing that he was not guilty, Chao Jixiang kowtowed to the ground and said, "Your Majesty, this subject believes that the Yunnan matter is not unsolvable. The reason why the progress of the various armies is slow and they have not achieved victory is because the generals at the front are afraid of the enemy. As they say, the emperor is far away and there is no one to supervise them. Is an imperial decree not enough for them to go all out? This subject requests to send an army supervisor to the front lines to put pressure on them. This way, it would be equivalent to His Majesty having an extra pair of eyes watching them. With His Majesty keeping an eye on them, there would be no need to worry about them not doing their best and not risking their lives. Finally understanding the meaning of Chao Jixiang's words, Zhu Qizhen's brows furrowed deeply. Minister Chao means to send eunuchs to the front lines to supervise the troops. This official is not afraid. The people sent can be arranged to be Your Majesty's trusted subordinates. This official will not say anything more about this matter. Chao Jixiang did not admit nor deny. He was afraid that his suggestion would give Zhong the impression that he wanted to seize power and meddle in the military, so he didn't dare to say anything. Originally, the Ming dynasty had a system of inspecting the army. Every time there was a war, eunuchs would be sent over. On the surface, it was to supervise the army, but in reality, it was to watch over the generals for the emperor and report their performance in the form of secret memorials. Reality proved that with eunuchs supervising the army, the generals at the front lines did not dare to be negligent. Some even purposely showed a very brave appearance in order to gain the favor of the eunuchs. It was so that their names could be passed to the emperor's ears, and then their future would be limitless. However, ever since the defeat of Tomu, for the sake of Zhong's reputation, everyone put the blame on Wang Jin. There were even people who said that war was not a game. How could there be an outsider guiding an expert? It was also from then on that the idea of eunuchs supervising the army was rejected. This also caused the entire group of eunuchs to revolve around the emperor. Otherwise, without military power, they could be removed and replaced at any time. For the sake of supervising the army, for the sake of seizing military power, these eunuch leaders had thought of ways to solve this problem more than once. However, with Wang Zhen's example as an example, it was extremely difficult for them to change their minds. And now, the opportunity seemed to have come. Zhu Qizhen's dissatisfaction with the situation in Yunnan allowed Chao Jixiang, who was following beside him, to see an opportunity. Chao Jixiang was completely dedicated to the country and the people, and this moved Zhu Qizhen. He had also felt that the imperial power did not seem to have enough control over the war in Yunnan. It was not that he had not thought of sending eunuchs to supervise the army. Although there was a drawback of an outsider guiding an expert, it was undeniable that with eunuchs at the front lines, the imperial power would be able to reach the army, and it would be better for the army to fight bravely. In the past, it was because of Wang Zhen's influence and the obstruction of the officials that he had no choice but to stop the example of eunuchs supervising the army. However, now that Jiaoji was so rampant, no one would say anything if he proposed to send eunuchs to supervise the army. What? The other party wanted the empress to be his wife. Could it be that the emperor was not allowed to retaliate? Good. Great companion's loyalty to the country is exemplary. Since that is the case, I order Qianliang to be the eunuch supervising the army in Yunnan. He will supervise the generals on the battlefield and kill the enemy bravely. Those who disobey will be punished according to the law. Zhu Qizhen finally opened his mouth and personally mentioned Qianliang's name. Chao Jixiang was not surprised by this and kowtowed to the ground again. Your Majesty is wise. Long live the emperor. Who was Qianliang? He was the nephew of the great eunuch Qian Sengbao. Qian Sengbao recalled that when he was outside the Yang family in Baiming, he was someone who had wrestled with Jining. He was also an old official of Yingzhong. Later, he followed the other officials to Nanjing. However, due to Wang Zhen's influence, he had been very low-key recently. Lying low was equivalent to waiting for an opportunity. Now that the opportunity had finally arrived, he could finally soar into the sky. It seemed that Qianliang was Qian Sengbao's man and seemed to have some disagreements with Chao Jixiang. However, that was just for outsiders to see. In fact, since coming to Nanjing, these eunuchs had been unusually united. Perhaps they also knew that if they did not do this, they would not have a chance to stand out. Therefore, on the surface, they did not see eye to eye with each other, but their relationship was very good in secret. This time, Chao Jixiang made a suggestion. He had never thought of sending his own people to supervise the army. He only needed eunuchs to go, and it was equivalent to achieving his goal. As for who the eunuchs were, it could be considered a close relationship with him. Zhu Qixin's imperial edict was sent out. Qianliang also led a group of genie guards out of the capital and went straight to Nanjing. This scene was seen by many of the officials, but this time no one spoke out in opposition. If there was someone to blame the king of Jiaoji for speaking too arrogantly. If there was someone to blame the eunuchs for choosing such a good opportunity to stand out. It was so good that the officials could not resist. In the Kuang residence in the capital, Kuang Yi, who had been ordered to recuperate at home, could not leave the residence or go to the court to meet the emperor. However, his position as the Minister of War did not change. There would be people who would immediately inform him of the big and small matters that happened in the court. When he learned that the emperor had sent eunuchs to supervise the army in Yunnan, Kuang Yi sighed. Has the emperor already forgotten about Wang Zhen's future troubles? Does he not know that doing this will only make the situation worse? After the long sigh, Kuang Yi could not help but think of Yang Qindong's appearance. After being the Minister of War for so many years, Kuang Yi was someone who understood the military. The situation in Yunnan was complicated and chaotic. How could sending eunuchs to supervise the army solve the problem? If these eunuchs went, not only would they not be of help, but they would also make the situation more chaotic. Then, who would solve the problem there in the end? It seemed that it should be placed on Yang Qindong. As for how to deal with Yang Qindong, it was only after Kuang Yi returned to his residence that the imperial court made the decision. It was like the birds were gone and the bough was hidden. However, the problem was that there were still birds, and there were many of them. He did not understand why Emperor Yingzong was so anxious to hide Yang Qindong. However, now that it had become a reality, what he needed to do was to change the result and not to find out the reason. Come, get the brush, paper, and inkstone. I want to write a letter to Guan Ying. Che Li, the temporary location of the Min prince's residence. Che Li was the Che Li Xian Si, located in the southeast suburb of Jinghong City, Yunnan. This was the place chosen by the Min prince before he announced his independence. Because of the complicated terrain and the fact that it was far from the Central Plains, it was chosen as the new place to rise. This was the place where the Min Zhuang was originally the king of foreign affairs. At this time, it was heavily guarded both inside and outside. Men with swords and spears could be seen everywhere to ensure that without the red flag, even a fly could not fly into the courtyard. However, in such a heavily guarded place, a young master in his 20s, wearing a soft gauze tang headscarf, wearing a purple embroidered robe, holding a white paper folding fan in his hand, with a slender body and a jade-like face. He walked gracefully, smiling before speaking, with an elegant and noble temperament, as if he was taking a stroll in a courtyard. From time to time he would look around, as if he was looking for the beautiful scenery in the courtyard. All the guards acted as if they did not see this young master's appearance. No matter where his gaze fell, it was as if it was a matter of course. Young Master Yao, why did you come here? We have been looking for you for a long time. Two anxious maids came to the front of the young master, panting as they spoke, as if they were complaining about something. Haha, thank you for your hard work. Is the princess looking for me? There was a faint smile on the young master's face. Just this smile alone gave people the feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Yes, the princess has prepared a new song. She is just waiting for young Master Yao to appreciate it together. The two maids kept nodding. After saying this, they pulled the young man's arms and walked straight to another courtyard. This young master Yao, still maintained a smile on his face and allowed the two girls to pull him. However, deep in the corner of his eyes, there was a faint killing intent. He was currently memorizing every scene in the courtyard, including how many guards there were, where they were distributed, and so on. Chapter 415. Young Master Yao's surname was Yao, and his given name was Ingjun. As a matter of fact, he was as handsome as his name suggested. His appearance belonged to the sunny and energetic type of man. In modern terms, he was the type of fresh meat. He had big eyes and a fair complexion. Many women's complexions were far inferior to his. When such a man appeared, he would often receive the attention of those women. However, what everyone did not know was that Yao Ingjun had another identity. He was the ace spy of the Yangxia Security Bureau. This time he came to King Min's territory to infiltrate the enemy's territory and obtain inside information. However, he did not expect that the moment he appeared in the Chirizi Bureau, King Min's sister, Julienne, fell in love with him at first sight because of his extraordinary charm and temperament. This woman, who was given the title of Forever Victory Group leader, fell in love with him at first sight. Thus, she invited Yao Ingjun to her home. Naturally, Yao Ingjun was eager to see this happen. In this way, he would become a frequent visitor to the prince's mansion, so much so that all the guards here knew him. In addition, Princess Yongsheng had previously instructed everyone to be as polite to young master Yao as they were to her. Thus, she could walk around the mansion at any time without any restrictions. As Yao Ingjun followed the two maidservants to Princess Yongsheng's courtyard, he said politely and casually, "It's strange. Why is the courtyard so quiet today?" "Young Master Yao, you don't know. Several princes have gone to the army camp. It seems that the situation at the front line is a little tense." "Yes, I also heard about it. But no matter what, it doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with us women. Also, young Master Yao, although you are a man, you have a good appearance. As long as you please our princess, you will be able to live a life of luxury." The two maidservants talked one after another. When they saw Yao Ingjun's gaze on them, they could not help but smile shyly. It was clear that his good looks had not only deeply attracted Princess Yongsheng, but even these maidservants were also greatly attracted to him. Yao Ingjun was very annoyed when others said that he had a good appearance. However, in order to complete the task, he did not show it on the surface. In fact, he was already thinking about the content of the meeting in the army camp. As King Min Zhuang's most beloved sister, it should not be difficult to know. How could he get the information from it? 5 miles away from Min King's mansion, in the military camp, King Min Zhuang Zhu Huilu, King Guangtong Zhu Huilu, and King Yangzong Zhu Huilu were holding a military meeting with their subordinates. The 3 sons of Zhu had some ability. At the very least, they still had some talented people under them. It was because of the operation of these people that they were able to reach their current scale and become an existence that gave Huang Zong and Zhu Qijin headaches. These so-called talents included Duan Yuhong, who was good at strange skills, Meng Ning, who was brave and good at fighting, Qin Tian, who was good at talking, and Yu Libin, who was good at reading people's faces and knew some supernatural skills. It was the existence of these talents that made the situation in Yunnan more and more chaotic. They also formed a temporary alliance with Jiaozhi and Miao Jun and forced the Mu family to not dare to act rashly. Originally, if this situation continued, it would not take long for the southern Ming army to fall into a completely passive state. Then the entire Yunnan might fall. Then the war would expand outward, and they would achieve the general trend of occupying a corner of the world. Finally, they would seek the Central Plains and seize the world. However, after Mu Bin was crowned as the king of Shiping, the situation of the war changed accordingly. Is Yingzong crazy? Since when can a person with a different surname be crowned as a king? Will the world still belong to our Zhu family? King Yangzong Zhu, who was the most impatient and the youngest among the 3 brothers, could not help but complain. With regards to Yingzong's decision, which one of them could understand. In their opinion, even if the world was taken over by them in the future, it would still be ruled by the Zhu clan. As the saying goes, the meat will rot in the pot. But now that a person with a different surname could be crowned as a king, there were more variables. Okay, now is not the time to talk about this. Let's think about what to do next. Mu Bin, who has been crowned as a king, will not be able to wait and see like before. Soon he will make a big move. How should we deal with it? That's the big thing that we need to discuss. King Minzhuangzhu, who is also the leader of the group, said at this moment. Then his gaze fell on King Guangtong, Zhu Huihua, and said, "Second brother, you should tell us what to do next." Okay. Zhu Huiqin nodded at Zhu Huiqin, then glanced at the crowd and said slowly, "Mu Bin has been conferred the title of King of Sheeping. Even if it's just for this title, he must be our enemy. Previously, we fantasized about joining forces with him and even promised to give him a share of the world. We must change our plans. Fortunately, the negotiations with Jiaoji fell apart. I don't know who helped us a lot, but they actually killed the envoy sent by Ingzong." When Zhu Huihua said this, everyone sneered. Obviously, everyone had the same opinion about this matter. That was, it should be King Lily of Jiaoji who sent people. But the other party did not admit it. In addition, they were allies now, so there was no need to ask the other party to admit anything. The Jiaoji kingdom will not retreat. Instead, they have been forced into a corner. Next, we can discuss how to deal with King Sheeping's army together. I think it will be difficult for anyone to gain any advantage in a short time. As for how to deal with the army of the southern Ming dynasty, we still need to discuss a countermeasure. When Zhu Huihua said this, his gaze naturally fell on Duan Yuhong, who was standing below. Duan Yuhong was famous for his strange skills in Yunnan. This person had foresight and considered the future. He had the talent of a military advisor. Now that Zhu Huihua was asking for his opinion, he stepped forward. 3 princes, the army of the southern Ming dynasty, is actually not difficult to deal with. When the 3 princes heard such confident words, they could not help but feel their eyes light up. They quietly waited for the next words to appear. 3 princes, it was still difficult to deal with the army of the imperial court. They always shrank and did not advance. Even if we wanted to take advantage of them, it would be difficult. However, it is different now. The southern Ming emperor has sent a eunuch to supervise the army. This is our opportunity. As long as we can reveal a certain flaw, I think that even if the generals of the imperial court do not want to, the eunuch in charge of the army will force them to take action. As such, as long as the plan is right, it will not be difficult to severely injure them. If we have the support of the Miao family, perhaps the situation of the entire Yunnan can be settled after this battle. Duan Yuhong's face was full of smiles. It had to be said that his move from the military supervisor's body was a brilliant move. Good, ha ha ha. After Zhu Huihua heard this, he laughed loudly. Then this matter will be handed over to Duan Yuhong. Everyone else must give their full cooperation. As for persuading the Miao family to participate in the battle, it will be handed over to Chen Tian. There should be no problem. The eloquent Chen Tian nodded and said, 3 princes, please be at ease. This subject will do his best to facilitate this matter. Good. Next, we must work together. In the future, once we have success, everyone here will have merit in supporting the emperor. You will all be great meritorious officials. You will all be bestowed with titles and wives. After the matter was resolved, Zhu Huihua, who was in a good mood, laughed loudly in the hall. The situation of Yunnan became more and more clear after Ingzong was bestowed the title of prince. There was a clear change in the attitude of all sides. When all of this reached the ears of Yang Qindong, who was still training in the forest, he could not help but sigh. In that case, everything will be over soon. It won't be long before someone remembers us. At that time, we will see how we sweep the world. Saying such bold words was not only because of Yang Qindong's confidence in the Yang family army, but also because he saw the weakness of his opponent. Mutual distrust and serious internal friction. How could all of this be compared to the Yang faction, which was developing at high speed and was united as one? War was more about the hearts of the people. Yang Qindong, who had grasped the heart of the people, had the weapon given to him by Datsung. What else could he be afraid of? As Yang Qindong waited, Shiping Wang Mubin made the first move. Different from the previous probing attacks, this time Mubin personally led 30,000 vanguard troops and headed straight for Kelisai. However, halfway there, they were intercepted by the Jiaoji army and the army gathered by the three brothers of King Min. According to the previously discussed plan, Shiping Wang sent out his troops, followed by the southern Ming army in Yunnan. They were led by Dong Xing, who led 80,000 troops and headed straight for Kelisai. Perhaps it was because the king of Min's army had gone to stop the king of Shiping's army, so they made rapid progress. They had originally planned to take 7 days to reach the Cheli agency, but they had already covered 3/4 of the distance on the 3rd day. Dong Xing, who led the troops, thought that King Min's army was not strong enough and underestimated the enemy. Coupled with the constant urging of the military supervisor, Qianliang, out of pride, he did not care that the middle and rear troops were still on their way. He did not care about the drawbacks of lengthening the battle line and led 20,000 vanguard troops straight to Kelisai. However, just as they were about to reach Kelisai, 100,000 Miao troops suddenly appeared, together with 50,000 King Min's troops. With so many enemies appearing like landslides and tsunamis, they rushed into the army of the southern Ming Empire. It was as if a river had flooded the land, drowning the 20,000-strong army. Not only that, even the military governor, Dong Xing, was killed in the chaos. Chapter 416. 20,000 vanguards were destroyed, and what followed was a crushing defeat. Nearly half of the remaining 60,000 soldiers were killed or captured, and the other half of them had fled. Only Qianliang, the supervisor of the army, returned to Guangnan Prefecture with 15,000 generals and barely survived the battle. When the news of the defeat of the southern Ming army reached King Mubin of Shiping, he hurriedly brought his army back to Yunnan Prefecture for fear of falling into a trap. The loss of this battle caused the elite troops that the southern Ming Empire had placed in Yunnan to be completely lost. Their strength had also dropped by close to half. At this moment, King Min, Jiaoji, and Miao Jun's counterattack arrived. They first sent a part of the army to monitor King Shiping in Yunnan Prefecture, and then gathered the main force to surround Guangnan Prefecture. Without any preparation, the South Ming army in Guangnan Prefecture retreated in a flurry in order to avoid being besieged. Besides abandoning Guangnan Prefecture, they even left most of the grains and fodder in the city for the sake of Prince Min's troops who had caught up with them. After abandoning Guangnan Prefecture, they planned to march to Guangxi Prefecture to meet up with King Shiping's army. However, they dared not trust anyone. Fearing that King Shiping would stab them in the back, Governor Wang Lai of Huguang proposed that the newly appointed administrative secretary of Yunnan and the former administrative secretary of Guangdong, Yang Xinmin, and army supervisor Qianliang both agreed. The army left Yunnan and headed toward Guangxi Xiqing Prefecture. But who would have thought that without enough communication in advance, the Guangxi army was not prepared enough, causing the army to advance too slowly. Not long after the army entered Xiqing Prefecture, they found the king of Min's troops chasing from behind. After a night in Xiqing Province, the army continued to retreat to the east. They passed through Qingyuan Prefecture, Guilin Prefecture, Guangxi Prefecture, Shaozhou Prefecture in Guangdong, and finally arrived at Ganzhou Prefecture in Jiangxi Province. A few months ago, it was here that Yang Qindong met up with the remaining 10,000 soldiers in Guangdong and solved the rebellion of the Yellow Bandits in Guangdong. However, who would have thought that Wang Lai and his army would also retreat to this place in such a short time? After losing most of the cities in Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong, the southern Ming army finally settled down. King of Min's troops did not chase after them. Instead, they began to digest the land and cities they had just obtained. Because this place was jointly attacked by the Min king, Jiaoji, and Miao people, they still needed to discuss the division of the city. This gave the southern Ming army a chance to catch their breath. But at the same time, it had to be said that after most of the 3 provinces were occupied, the 3 armies formed by the Min king's faction also revealed their true nature. They burned, killed, and pillaged everywhere. For a time, the people of the 3 provinces had no way to make a living. Many big families were robbed. Many people were displaced. They did not have clothes to wear and food to fill their stomachs. The news of the army's defeat spread like a gust of wind to the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. When Zhu Qijin, who was in the main hall of the palace, heard the news, he fainted on the spot. Not long after, important officials and generals came to the palace. To everyone's surprise, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, who had been ordered to recuperate at home a while ago, was also present. Kuang Yi stood in the imperial court without the slightest hint of illness, but his ashen face told everyone that he was in an extremely bad mood. It was not just Kuang Yi. There was probably no one in the imperial court who was in a good mood. 1/3 of these officials were important officials in the capital of the northern Ming dynasty. They had come to Nanjing because they trusted Zhu Qijin. They had originally thought that they would first establish the southern Ming dynasty with Yingzhou. Then, after working hard, they would counterattack Baiming and unify the great Ming dynasty. At that time, they would all have the merit of supporting the emperor, and it would not be impossible for them to be recorded in the annals of history. Who would have thought that 2 seemingly insignificant civil conflicts in the south would lead to such a consequence? The southern Ming Empire had lost 3 provinces in a row. If it wasn't contained, it wouldn't be long before the entire southern Ming Empire would cease to exist. At that time, let alone returning to the capital, it would be hard to say whether or not they would be able to keep their lives. The sudden turn of events and the terrible situation left everyone speechless. The civil and military officials arrived one after another. Then they all imitated Kuang Ye's gloomy expression, looking very unsightly. The officials were silent, which was a rare occurrence. The head eunuch, Chao Jixiang, broke the silence with his horsetail whisk. The moment he appeared, the commotion attracted everyone's attention. Chao Jixiang's expression was also not good. He first swept his gaze across the officials, and when he saw that everyone was present, he sighed in relief and said, "The emperor has decreed that Kuang Yi, Wang Zhuo, Chen Sun, Xiao Xian, and Shang Lu are to wait in the inner hall." This official obeys. Kuang Yi and the other 4 hurriedly bowed and cupped their fists. Then they followed behind Chao Jixiang and left the throne room. When the 5 of them left, the other officials looked at each other. For a moment, they did not know whether to leave or not. Some of the officials looked at the Minister of Rights, Lu Da, and the Minister of Works, Jiang Yuan. Of the 6 ministers, only the 2 of them were left behind. It was inevitable that they would be looked at. In particular, the Minister of Rights, Lu Da, left behind many doubtful gazes. Jiang Yuan was the Minister of Works. He could not play a big role in the war. At most, he could supervise the forging of weapons. However, it was said that he had already forged many usable weapons a while ago. They could be used by the army at any time. As a result, the effect he could play was very small. Lu Da was different. He was the Minister of Rights. War was not as simple as fighting. There were more negotiations and public opinion. These were all done by the Ministry of Rights. But now he was indeed left here. Thinking back to the fact that it was because of his advice that Minister Kuang Yi had to return home to recuperate, which led to the defeat of the war, everyone couldn't help but look at him with many more question marks. Lu Da naturally felt this. He also knew that the emperor needed to find a scapegoat for the defeat of the front line. Although it might not be him, the appropriate punishment was always needed. The fact that he did not wait for the emperor's arrival was a clear proof. However, Even though he knew this, Luda still stood there without showing the slightest trace of fear. He knew these courtiers too well. Once you were in power, you could say all kinds of sweet words, even mushy ones, out of your mouth. On the other hand, once you've lost your power, you'll be able to say all sorts of nasty things. In the main hall, Luda, who was standing there, was suffering. Inside the hall, Zhu Qijin, who had returned to normal, was sitting on the golden dragon throne. Apart from his face being a bit pale, there was nothing wrong with him. Seeing the 5 officials in front of him, Zhu Qijin pointed at the table and said, "Dear officials, please sit down." "Thank you, Your Majesty. We are guilty and we do not dare to sit." The 5 ministers looked at each other, shook their heads, and said that they were guilty. Often, the more polite the emperor was to you, the more it meant that it was not a good thing. They had seen this many times. Naturally, they did not dare to casually sit down. "AI, what are you guilty of?" "The guilty ones are the generals at the front lines. It has nothing to do with you. Sit down." "Minister Kwang, you're the oldest here, and your health hasn't been good for a while, so you should take the lead and sit down." "All right, is your body all right now?" Zhu Qijin tried his best to express his concern for Kwang Yi and the others. "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. This official's body is fine," Kwang Yi said with a face full of gratitude. Good, good. It's good that you are fine. We cannot lack capable officials like you by our side. That's right, all of you should sit down." After a round of sentimentality, the other officials also looked for their seats and sat down one by one with expressions of gratitude on their faces. After everyone was seated, Zhu Qijin let out a long sigh and said, "Dear officials, I'm sure you all know about the defeat of the front lines. It was all Wang Ji's rotten idea that caused us to make a mistake in our strategy. Also, the generals at the front lines were afraid of death, resulting in the current situation. We truly regret it." After a series of self-criticism, Zhu Qijin shook his head with a look of regret. Then he nodded to Chao Jixiang, who was standing to the side. "Yes," Chao Jixiang hurriedly replied. He then took out the golden back of the imperial edict and read it aloud. "By the will of the heavens, Your Majesty, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Wang Ji, retreated in fear of the enemy. He is to be immediately removed from his position and brought back to the capital to be imprisoned. The embroidered uniform guard, Qian Liang, is to be demoted to a baihu of the embroidered uniform guard. He is to be punished with half a year's salary. The governor of Huguang, Yang Xinmin, and the other officials are to be punished with a year's salary. They are to be demoted by half a rank and remain in the army." In the imperial edict, all the generals and officials of Yunnan were punished. This was especially true for Wang Ji. He had only been in Yunnan for less than a month, and he had gone from being in the limelight to being a prisoner. The situation had changed so quickly that it made people sigh at the unpredictability of heaven's might and the difficulty of being an official. After punishing all the officials, especially the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, it was the same as putting an end to the failure of the war. Next, it was time to talk about the current situation. "Dear officials, the traitor Zhu Huiqiang and the others have already caused chaos in Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong. They will soon reach Jiangxi. What advice do you have for us?" Zhu Qijin's hopeful gaze fell on the 5 old officials. His face was filled with anticipation. What followed next was a period of silence in the inner hall. The southern Ming Empire did not have a large army to begin with. Last time, when Kwang Yi was inspecting the guard stations, he discovered that there were some people who were not paid. As a result, the guards were not at full strength. At that time, the rough estimate was that there were less than 1 million people. Chapter 417. They had less than 1 million soldiers. Previously, they had used more than 300,000 soldiers in Yunnan. After several defeats, another 100,000 soldiers were added, but they were still defeated. Looking at it this way, even if the entire southern Ming Empire's army was gathered together, they would only have about 500,000 soldiers, or even less. These people still needed to guard many cities and prefectures, so it was impossible to mobilize all of them. Otherwise, not only Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong, but other places would also riot due to the absence of the military presence. Without a weapon to use, it was like a clever housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. No matter who it was, it would be difficult to solve the problem in a short period of time. Of course, it could not be solved now, but it did not mean that it could not be solved in the future. For example, they could recruit soldiers again. After the rule of Ren Xuanji, the population of the great Ming Empire was still large. It was not difficult to recruit 1 million soldiers under the command of Ren Xuanji. The difficult thing was that they did not have the time. It took time to recruit soldiers, and so did training. If they really recruited 1 million soldiers, it would take at least 2 years to perfect it. It would take such a long time. Would the king of Min's people give it to them? What if they killed their way over during this time? The situation would be even more chaotic. Even if it was too late to recruit soldiers, there was another way that might work. It was to ask for help from Ming. Today, Ming did not have any wars because of geographical reasons, and it was said that they had just recruited a lot of soldiers and were training. They should have extra soldiers. If they could borrow 500,000 soldiers from them, the problem of the king of Min could be solved. But the problem was, would they agree? If they really borrowed 500,000 soldiers, would they listen to Ingzong? Don't turn the spearhead and charge to Nanjing. That would really be diverting the calamity. Don't think that Bai Ming wouldn't do such a thing. Why did the king of Shiping not go all out for a long time? Wasn't it because of them? It was because of their interference that the situation in Yunnan changed. The king of Min's strength was getting stronger and stronger, and now he occupied 3 provinces. It was too late to recruit soldiers, and asking for help was not reliable. No wonder the 5 ministers bowed their heads in silence. They really did not have a better way. Zhu Qijin was disappointed when he saw the long silence. What's wrong? My beloved subjects, is there really no hope for our southern Ming dynasty? Are we really going to hand over the country our ancestors left to us? If that's the case, how am I supposed to face my ancestors? As he spoke, Zhu Qijin's eyes actually welled up with tears, an extremely sorrowful appearance. We are incompetent. Wang Zue and the other 4 important officials saw the emperor's actions and were so frightened that they hurriedly got up and knelt on the ground. People always say that if a minister is incompetent, then a monarch is tyrannical. Even the ruler of a country was forced to shed tears. So how could the subjects not be terrified? Zhu Qijin was moved, but the ministers couldn't do anything about it. This made him even sadder. His heart seemed to be dripping blood when he saw the important ministers kneeling on the ground one after another. He had called a few important ministers over in order to find a chance to strike back. Could it be that there was really no other way? The Minister of Revenue, Wang Zue, knelt on the ground. The Minister of Personnel, Chun Sun, knelt on the ground. The Minister of Justice, Xiao Xian, knelt on the ground. The Minister of War, Kuang Yi, did not kneel on the ground. Zhu Qijin thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But when he looked again and saw that Kuang Yi was not kneeling on the ground, his eyes lit up. He suddenly stood up and asked with an anxious expression, Minister Kuang, do you have a good plan? I don't dare to say that there is a good plan, but there is a way. If it works, it can buy us some time. Kuang Yi said with some uncertain evidence. By time? Zhu Qijin seemed to be confused. Yes, by time. Our southern Ming dynasty has not been in a war for a long time, and our population is flourishing. As long as the emperor issues an imperial edict to recruit a large number of soldiers, it will not be long before we have an additional 1 million soldiers. However, this will take some time. Right now, there's only one person who can buy us some time. Who is it? Zhu Qijin's expression was incomparably nervous when he heard that there were still people and soldiers that could be used. He asked with hope in his eyes, as if he was afraid that Kwang Yi would not tell him the answer if he asked too late. The Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong. Kwang Yi did not make Zhu Qijin wait for long. He firmly said a name. When the name was said, the other ministers who were looking at Kwang Yi also raised their heads in shock. Then, as if they thought of something, they slowly lowered their heads. Yang Qindong, the person who had once saved Ingzong on the battlefield, had become a taboo existence at a certain level. No one knew the reason for this. Perhaps it was because he was too capable, or perhaps it was because he was too good at fighting. However, such a person did not completely submit to the emperor. It was no wonder that everyone avoided talking about him. As a result, when Yang Qindong took action to deal with the Huang bandit army in Guangdong, no one in the imperial court was willing to speak up for him. It was as if everyone had a tacit understanding and did not ask about this person. This was like getting rid of a donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Now that he had encountered another big problem, someone had actually mentioned Yang Qindong. If he were to use him at this time, would he accept it? Would he agree? These were naturally the thoughts of the ministers. This matter was in Zhu Qijin's heart, but he had more considerations. He knew about Su Maner's matter. Although he did not appear from the beginning to the end, he had already tacitly approved of Commander Menda's actions. This could not be denied. In other words, he also had thoughts of killing Yang Qindong. There was no familial love in the eyes of the imperial family. This was something that everyone knew. However, the actual situation was not only that there was no kinship, but also that it was difficult for gratitude to exist. Since ancient times, how many officials had saved the emperor's life? But in the end, how many of them had a good ending? As the saying went, it was fine to share weal and woe, but it was hard to say if one could share joy. Even if Yang Qindong had saved Ingzong's life, even if he had contributed greatly to the South Ming Empire, just based on the fact that he was good at fighting but was unable to become a loyal minister, there was no room for discussion about killing him. Under various circumstances, Zhu Qijin tacitly approved of Commander Menda's actions. Moreover, he had received a secret report from the embroidered uniform guards saying that Su Maner had succeeded. Yang Qindong had been staying in the military camp, using the excuse of recuperating and so on. When he heard this news, Zhu Qijin could not help but feel a trace of sympathy in his heart. However, after a while, he forgot about this matter. Perhaps in his eyes, saving his life was not important. What was important was his throne and whether or not he could inherit the country left behind by his ancestors. It was because he had already sentenced Yang Qindong to death in his heart that this person had long disappeared from his mind. Thus, when the situation was critical, he did not think of this person. Now that he heard Kwang Ye's reminder, doubt appeared in his heart. Could it be that Yang Qindong was not dead? If he was not dead, he could make good use of it now. Beloved official Kwang, where is he now? After Zhu Qijin's thoughts returned to normal, he asked with hope. Replying to Your Majesty, the Duke of Zhongdan is currently outside Gaozhou Prefecture in Guangdong. I heard that he is sick and is currently recuperating. Over there, my Ministry of War's Guaning, embroidered uniform guards, Steward Wei Guang, and Guangdong Guards Commander General Ma Wei are all there. Kwang Yi replied in a low voice and gave a simple description of the situation over there. As for why those people were there, the emperor should be very clear about it. Oh, Zhen remembers now. Zhu Qijin suddenly understood and nodded his head. He thought of the secret report from the genie guard a while ago. It said that Wei Guang was thinking of ways to persuade the mercenaries to work for him. At that time, he also thought that this was a good idea. The great Ming Empire was vast and abundant in resources. What good things did it not have? As long as he was sincere enough, it was not impossible to keep those mercenaries who could fight for him. However, he did not receive any secret reports in such a long time. It seemed that the progress of the matter was not smooth. If it was not smooth, then it was good. If it was not smooth, then there was a possibility of Yang Qindong sending troops to quell the rebellion. Otherwise, if he really accepted the mercenaries, it would be equivalent to falling out with them. Zhu Qijin quickly made a decision in his heart. After the court, he would notify the embroidered uniform guards and have them stop what they were doing to the mercenaries. At least on the surface, they would ease the relationship between them. However, this was a method of mending the pen after the sheep had been lost. The important thing was to discuss with Yang Qindong. Thinking of this, he said to Kuang Yi, "Jean heard that the Duke of Loyal Valor is sick. Is his illness serious?" "This, I do not know. I have sent Guaning to visit him, but I have not seen him. He could not even enter the barracks. I think his rank is not high enough." Kuang Yi hesitated as he spoke. If that's the case, we should send an important official over." Zhu Qijin nodded as he said this. Then his gaze fell on Kuang Yi. "Beloved official Kuang, I am afraid that I will have to trouble you to make a trip. If you can see the Duke of Loyal Valor, ask him to take action no matter what. Don't ask him to defeat the rebels, but at least stabilize the current situation and buy time for our southern Ming dynasty to develop. I am old." This time, Kuang Yi did not immediately agree. Instead, he spoke with an ambiguous attitude. Kuang Yi said this because he was complaining. He was complaining about how Ingzong grounded him at home a while ago. Now that he had a use for him, he did not think about the fact that he was almost 70 years old. Chapter 418. When the word old was mentioned, one could see that Ingzong's face instantly turned green. Ahem, how can Minister Kuang say that? Your body is healthy, so I think it's good. Didn't you tell me to rest at home a while ago? You should be fine now. I'm still not feeling well. Moreover, Gaozhou Prefecture is very far from Nanjing. I can't guarantee that I can get there quickly. When Kuang Yi saw that Zhu Qijin had a guilty look on his face when he mentioned his illness, he felt pity for him and his heart softened. However, when he considered the long journey, he was afraid that he would make a mistake and instinctively wanted to refuse. "It's fine. You can take a carriage there. I will arrange for the relay stations along the way." Kuang Yi listened to the announcement. Zhu Qijin was afraid that if he continued to delay, Kuang Yi would find another excuse. Thus he said in a firm tone, "Minister of War Kuang Yi is an experienced strategist. As my right-hand man, you will be conferred the title of Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince and also the Minister of War." He was conferred an official just like that. The Crown Prince's junior tutor was one of the 3 orphans. At the same time, he was a secondary grade 1 official and also the Minister of War. It could be said that he held great power and was definitely one of the pillars of the imperial court. As soon as the imperial edict was passed down, the other 5 ministers all had looks of envy on their faces. Words of congratulations could be heard one after another. When the imperial edict was given, Kuang Yi was extremely touched. Ever since the great Ming dynasty was split into the north and south, there were no longer any primary grade officials in the imperial court. The cabinet was also removed. The ministers of the 6 ministries became the leaders of the officials. He originally thought that he would be satisfied if he could keep his position until he retired. However, he never thought that there would be a day when he would be promoted to Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince and become a secondary grade 1 official. With such a position, he could definitely be called the leader of the officials. How could he not be excited and moved by this honor? He was so touched that he knelt on the ground. "Thank you for your kindness. I will go home and pack up before heading to Guangdong. Even if I have to sacrifice my old bones, I will persuade the loyal duke to work for the great Ming dynasty and defeat the enemy." Good. Seeing that Kuang Yi was so straightforward, Zhu Qijin happily stood up and said, as expected of a loyal minister of the great Ming dynasty, a pillar of the country. Just like that, Minister Kuang immediately packed up and left. Everyone else had to cooperate with him to the best of their ability. In addition, if the Duke of Loyalty and Courage raises any conditions, my beloved subject can also agree to them on our behalf. Yes, Your Majesty. With Zhu Qijin's words, Kuang Ye's heart was filled with confidence. He had more confidence in the Guangdong trip. In this meeting with the emperor, Kuang Yi was conferred the title of Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince and regained the favor of the emperor. Outside the Kuang manor, there was an endless stream of officials who came to congratulate him. It was a scene of prosperity. In comparison, the mercenary camp outside Gaozhou City was as quiet as usual. After more than a month of training, all the cold vanguard soldiers and the auxiliary soldiers had gone through several forest battle drills. This allowed them to have a better understanding of how to fight in the forest. From being completely passive in the beginning to having the ability to fight back, their conditioned reflexes had formed. As long as they were walking in the forest, they would instinctively make some defensive or offensive responses if the slightest bit of the situation was wrong. Not bad, the military quality of the cold vanguard soldiers is very high. There are also quite a few good seedlings among the auxiliary soldiers. I'm afraid that it won't be long before the elite cold vanguard soldiers expand. Yang Qindong looked at the results of the drills that the various companies sent over and nodded repeatedly. He appeared very satisfied. Seeing that Yang Qindong was in a good mood, Ming, who was at the side, hurriedly handed over the report card about the temporary auxiliary soldiers' studies. Young master, take a look at this. Oh, it's the results of the temporary auxiliary soldiers. Not bad. There are actually so many who can score 60 points. Very good, very good. Looking at the results, although the knowledge tested was only for the second grade of elementary school, it was already very difficult to score a passing score. This at least meant that the literacy class was successful. Yes, not only did the political committee work hard, even the two madams put in a lot of effort. Some of them are already qualified to be temporary auxiliary soldiers and are even close to the standard of the cold vanguard soldiers. Now their loyalty is still to be tested. Tiger's Mane reported everything he knew to Yang Qindong. Loyalty is indeed a problem. No matter how strong a person is, no matter how strong a soldier is, without loyalty, the stronger they are, the easier it is for them to betray their master. Tell the political committee to pay special attention to this test. Yang Qindong nodded in agreement. Yes, young master is right. These people haven't been to Resin City, so it's not easy to do some work. After all, we can't be sure if there are spies from other parties. Now isn't the time to announce young master's identity. Tiger's Mane said in a troubled tone. The soldiers who joined the army in Resin City usually didn't have to worry too much about their loyalty. Other things aside, just the changes that could be seen with one's eyes were enough to let everyone know who to follow in order to live a good life. When they and their families lived a good life and didn't have to worry about food and drink, they would have to think about who brought all this to them. Why would they need to worry about loyalty? When someone mentioned that they had to join the army to protect their home and the fruits of victory from being violated by others, the number of people who joined the army had already reached 90%. In addition to the benefits a soldier could enjoy, it was enough to feed a family of 5 without having to worry about food and water. Once they reached a certain age and needed to retire from active service, they would be given jobs that others envied. Even those who were injured on the battlefield would be in high demand once they returned home. With all these benefits, why would they need to worry about the lack of manpower? Why would he need to worry that these people would have any rebellious thoughts and intentions? However, it was different in the territory of the great Ming dynasty. There were some people whose backgrounds weren't even clear. Even if one tried to brainwash these people, they wouldn't be able to meet the best requirements. If they were allowed to understand too much about these people, they would be exposed even more. If Yang Qindong's identity was exposed because of this, wouldn't there be a huge problem? At the very least, the safety of his family in the capital became the most important thing to worry about. We still need to seriously investigate their backgrounds. For those who we can't be completely sure of, we can consider persuading them to leave the ranks of temporary auxiliary soldiers. In short, if there is a trace of uncertainty, we can't use them, let alone use them. Yang Qindong nodded. How could he not know what the consequences would be if his current identity was exposed? At that time, even if he didn't rebel, others would say that he had rebelled. Why didn't he just become a subject of the great Ming dynasty? Why did he suddenly raise so many soldiers? If he really became a Sima Zhao, everyone would know about it. However, many times, what one feared would happen. Just as Yang Qindong and Tiger's Mane were discussing the loyalty of the temporary auxiliary soldiers, the deputy director of the security bureau, Yang San, hurriedly came looking for them. Panting, Yang San's appearance gave Yang Qindong a very bad feeling. Normally, Yang San's physical fitness was not bad. Under normal circumstances, even if he ran 10 kilometers, he would not be so out of breath. However, now that he was acting like this, it could only mean one thing. Something big must have happened. Young master, things are not good. One of our auxiliary soldiers has been captured. As expected, just as Yang San steadied himself, a very bad news came out of his mouth. What exactly happened? Yang Qindong asked with an unfriendly expression. It's like this. Yang San then gave a short report of what had happened. The person who was captured was called Lu Jian. He was a platoon leader in the auxiliary battalion who had just been promoted not long ago. He was a soldier from Mount Qishan on Ryukyu Island. His family had been in Mount Qishan for generations, so his background was very clean. In addition, he was very motivated and learned everything quickly. It didn't take long for him to become the squad leader of the auxiliary battalion. A while ago, because of his good performance, he was promoted to platoon leader of the auxiliary battalion. Under normal circumstances, those who could become platoon leader of the auxiliary battalion were qualified to enter the cold front. All they lacked was an opportunity to be tested. This time, during the training of the auxiliary battalion in the jungle battle, Lu Jian's performance was very outstanding. After the training results reached the standard, the battalion commander gave everyone a day off and allowed them to enter the nearby Gaozhou prefecture for a stroll. Lu Jian also took a day off and entered the city with his 5 comrades. This was also one of the military rules. Soldiers were not allowed to enter the city alone to prevent accidents from happening. Once the 5 of them were together, they could more or less take care of each other if anything happened. The chances of accidents happening were reduced to the lowest. Originally, Lu Jian and his group had been together since they entered the city. However, when they came across a rouge shop, Lu Jian thought that he should buy some things for his newly married wife in Mount Qishan. He also heard that the quality of the things in the Central Plains were very good, so he wanted to go in and take a look. However, his other comrades rejected his idea. They all laughed and said that this rouge shop was only for women. It was embarrassing for a man to go in. The others were not willing to go with him. So Lu Jian entered the rouge shop called Song's Rouge Shop alone and asked the other 4 to wait outside for a while. However, once he went in, there was no news of him. It was not until more than 15 minutes later that his 4 comrades felt that something was wrong. They went in together, but they didn't see Lu Jian inside. Feeling that this was a serious matter, 2 of the auxiliary soldiers stayed behind to keep watch outside the rouge shop. The other 2 quickly went out of the city and reported to the barracks. After Yang San received the news, he immediately asked for instructions from Yang Qindong. Chapter 419. Young Master, Platoon Leader Lu Jian is an auxiliary soldier who joined from Qishan. He knows a lot of things. If anything happens to him, I'm afraid the consequences will be unthinkable. After Yang San finished speaking, he reminded him softly. Tiger's Mane's expression was also nervous, as if he was afraid that Yang Qindong didn't understand. He added, Young Master, to be able to become a platoon leader of an auxiliary soldier, he basically knows your true identity. I know. Yang Qindong nodded heavily. But you shouldn't underestimate our soldiers. Since he can become a platoon leader, I'm sure that Soldier Lu Jian is a person with a strong will. We must all have confidence. Of course, just in case, they had to find the person and the sooner the better. How about this? Let's enter the city and see who has the guts to capture our people. After he finished speaking, Yang Qindong's eyes were already spitting out cold flames of anger. It could be seen that he was really angry this time. This wasn't as simple as capturing his people. The person behind the scenes probably wanted to know the true strength of the mercenaries. Young master, tell others that you're sick. When Tiger's Mane heard that Yang Qindong was going to personally go, he said worriedly, besides, to find someone, young master doesn't need to do it himself. I can go. You can't, at least not now. Yang Qindong shook his head decisively. It wasn't that he didn't trust Tiger's Mane, but Tiger's Mane's identity to the outside world was only his own servant. He didn't have any official position. If he went like this, it would be very inconvenient. He wasn't. Even if he didn't have the identity of an imperial envoy, he was still a loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty. Even if this title was given by Daizong and some people in the southern Ming dynasty didn't recognize it, he still had the identity of a loyal duke. As for telling others that he was sick, it was very simple. He just had to appear weak. It was also a good opportunity to see how those who wanted to harm him would react when they saw him like this. After Yang Qindong made up his mind, Tiger's Man and Yang Sen knew that they couldn't stop him, so they quickly went to prepare. Since they even dared to capture auxiliary soldiers, they had to be prepared to fall out with them at any time. This time they couldn't bring fewer soldiers into the city. Gaozhou Prefecture. There was an inconspicuous courtyard in the city. Broken walls could be seen everywhere, reminding people that this place had experienced a war not long ago. Courtyards like this could be seen everywhere in the city. After the Huang bandit army raided Gaozhou Prefecture twice, this place had long been emptied out. No one knew where the original owner had gone. This ownerless courtyard had now become the place where the embroidered uniform guards worked. Before this, Wei Guang had arranged for people to dig a cellar here. Thus, Lu Jian's kidnapping wasn't a coincidence. It was premeditated. It was just that his luck wasn't good and he just happened to be the target and kidnapped. In the courtyard, Wei Guang stood there in his embroidered uniform guard uniform. Beside him was a subordinate who wasn't very tall. At this moment, he was explaining something with a bitter face. You didn't say anything? Didn't we allow you to use your methods? Wei Guang's brows furrowed, and he seemed very displeased. Boss, this brat's skin is rough and his flesh is thick. He's very tight-lipped. If we didn't discover him in time, he would have bitten his tongue and killed himself. I think we should slow down and not be too hasty. When the short brat explained this, a trace of envy appeared on his face. Biting his tongue and killing himself? What a tough guy. Wei Guang was also shocked by this news. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said, Lu Si, keep an eye on this person. If we really need to slow down, think of a way to send him out of the city. You have to know that he's a mercenary. Once someone finds out that he was captured by us, I'm afraid we'll all have to bear the consequences. Boss, it can't be. We're the embroidered uniform guards. We don't need a reason to capture people. Even if they find out, what can they do to us? Lu Si's face was full of disbelief. Maybe they can't do anything to us? Or maybe they won't even care about losing a person. But no matter what, we still need to be prepared. How about this? You go and arrange it. Try your best to send him out of the city and find a safer place. Wei Guang didn't know why, but his right eye suddenly twitched twice. When he spoke these words, he was especially careful. Boss, there's urgent news. Another embroidered uniform guard quickly ran into the courtyard. What's the rush? Where's the steadiness I usually tell you to be? When Wei Guang saw that his subordinates didn't have any discernment and were so rash, a fierce look flashed across his face. Boss, the mercenaries have entered the city. I heard that the Duke of Loyalty has also entered the city. The embroidered uniform guard ignored Wei Guang's displeased look and told him the news he just received in one breath. What? Wei Guang, who was pretending to be absent-minded, suddenly froze when he heard this sentence. Then, as if he remembered something, he grabbed the collar of his subordinate and said, "What did you just say?" "Repeat it again." With his collar grabbed, the embroidered uniform guard found it difficult to breathe. At this moment, he didn't dare to resist. Instead, he forcefully repeated, "The mercenaries have entered the city." Looking at their grandiose appearance, I'm afraid there are no less than 2,000 of them. Among them, there's also a very luxurious carriage. I heard from others that it's the Duke of Loyalty's personal carriage. Bastard, how could this be? With a sudden force, Wei Guang let go of the embroidered uniform guard's big hand. Then he fiercely stomped his foot and glared at Lu Si as he said, "Don't move first. Let me go take a look first." "That's right. Instruct the people here to keep their eyes open. Once they find something wrong, kill them. In short, don't leave any evidence behind." Seeing that Wei Guang was so anxious, Lu Si didn't dare to be negligent and immediately nodded. "Boss, don't worry. Once something goes wrong, we'll kill them to silence them. The dead tell no tales." "Very good, let's go." Seeing that his subordinates understood his meaning, Wei Guang didn't want to stay here any longer. With a wave of his hand, he left the courtyard with nearly 30 embroidered uniform guards. However, what he didn't know was that his every move was being watched by someone. On the roof of a courtyard that was almost a street away, someone was using a high-powered telescope to see everything that was happening. The most frightening thing was that the person who was observing could read lips. In other words, the conversation between Wei Guang and Lu Si was also clearly heard by someone else. Young master is really amazing. He actually thought that it might be the embroidered uniform guards and arranged for us to follow Sir Qianshi. Hee, now that we know that Lu Jian is here, it's easy to handle. Tai, who put down the high-powered telescope in his hand and revealed a fierce face. The captain of the Wolf-Fang Special Forces, Tai Hu, was the one who could read lips and had been observing everything that was happening in the courtyard. In fact, not only Tai Hu, but also the other 19 members of the Wolf-Fang Special Forces were proficient in lip reading. This was also the special requirement that Yang Qindong had for them. Since they were the elites of the elites, not only did they have the most advanced weapons in their hands, but they also had to be able to rely on their own abilities. Tai Hu said confidently, but in the eyes of the extremely thin team member beside him, he couldn't help but worry. Tiger King, the 6th young master, said that the embroidered uniform guards are not weak. You must not be careless. Although Wei Guang is gone now, there are at least 10 embroidered uniform guards around. If you are not careful, Lu Jian's life will be lost. If something happens to him, our mission will be considered a failure. Nonsense. This captain doesn't know this point. Do I need you to remind me? All right, Skinny Monkey, hurry up and arrange the mission. Let King Kong, Violent Ape, Silver Hand, and Steel Leg get ready. Also, inform Captain Bai Zhuo of the Ghost Sniper team. Tell them that the opportunity to contribute and kill the enemy has come. Tai Hu said as he slapped the man with the nickname of Skinny Monkey. Skinny Monkey retreated as if he was flying backward. In just a blink of an eye, Skinny Monkey had retreated at least 4 meters away, which also allowed him to avoid Tai Hu's slap. It was obvious that this was not the first time something like this had happened. Skinny Monkey, who had retreated far away, heard that Tai Hu wanted to cooperate with the Ghost Sniper team to complete the mission. He knew that his captain was very careful in doing things, even though he said it happily. His heart was relieved. All right, Tiger King. Please wait for a moment. I will go and inform them now. Skinny Monkey, who had finished speaking, disappeared from the roof after a few ups and downs. It gave people the feeling that he was moving so fast that it was as if he was teleporting. Gaozhou Prefecture Government Compound. This place was completely surrounded by the mercenaries. Among them, there were a few Ming soldiers who were unwilling to submit and wanted to resist. Following that, they were showered with blows from the mercenaries. They thought that they were strong, But when faced with the angry elite Lungfeng, they were no different from children facing adults. What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you trying to rebel? The sudden attack caught the Ming army off guard. A few of the centurions of the Ming army shouted aggressively, wanting to use their power to suppress the enemy. Bang, 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 bang. What greeted this voice was a few powerful fists. The centurions who were shouting just now were soon swollen like pigs. Even when they spoke, their voices were no longer as clear and precise. What's going on? Everyone stop. The commotion here quickly attracted the attention of others. Following that, a loud shout was heard. General Yu Guang, who was fully clad in armor, appeared. When he saw that the people who were beaten up were all his subordinates, even the whiskers on his lips could not help but tremble a few times. Who was the one who attacked just now? Who was it? Stand out if you have the guts. Chapter 420. It's me. What do you want? Luo Pa, the commander of the 2nd Regiment of the Lungfeng Army, walked out of the crowd with the rank of colonel. He looked at Yu Guang with a mocking expression. Commander Luo. Yu Guang groaned in his heart when he recognized the person. From what he knew, this person was the leader of the mercenary army. Since he had stepped forward, the situation must be very bad, right? Could it be that they wanted to rebel like King Min and the others? Yu Guang's expression changed again and again when he had this thought. He knew the strength of the mercenary army. They had fought side by side before. At that time, he felt happy to have such an ally and fought to his heart's content. However, when this person became his opponent, he felt the same pressure on his shoulders. Yu Guang's expression changed again and his aura weakened. When the other Ming soldiers saw this, they couldn't help but lower their heads. Even their commander was about to give in. They didn't know what to do next. As the saying goes, a single soldier can bear the brunt of the enemy, but a whole nest of generals can bear the brunt of the enemy. Yu Guang didn't dare to say anything else. Luo Pa snorted coldly, then glanced at the Ming army in front of him and said, All soldiers, listen to my orders. If anyone dares to resist, beat him up first. If anyone dares to resist with weapons, we will let them have a taste of bullets. Yes, the Lungfeng members standing behind Luo Pa replied in unison. Their aura was truly like a landslide or a tsunami. Okay, 1 battalion will follow me in. The rest will stay outside. Without orders, no one is allowed to leave. After giving the order, Luo Pa strode into the government office. Wherever he went, the Ming soldiers who were originally blocking his way would all move out of his way, afraid that they would provoke him and get beaten up for nothing. Yu Guang originally wanted to stop Luo Pa, but when he saw the murderous aura in his eyes, his legs went soft. He didn't doubt that if he dared to block him, Luo Pa would really kill him. Wasn't Zhaoqing's general, Jia Ping, killed by Yang Qindong? After the incident, the imperial court did not say anything. Could it be that his life was more valuable than others? Yu Guang unconsciously retreated. The other Ming soldiers also retreated with him. It was not until they reached the gates of the inner courtyard that a shout came from behind them. Only then did the Ming soldiers, whose morale was already extremely low, stop. What's going on? What are you all doing? The voice behind Yu Guang was like the sound of nature to him, causing him to involuntarily stop in his tracks, following which he quickly turned around. General Ma, the mercenaries suddenly surrounded our magistrate's office. This general tried to reason with them, but they actually attacked us. General, please uphold justice for our brothers. General, please make the decision. The other Ming soldiers followed suit, looking as if they had been greatly wronged. Useless. When Ma Wei saw that Yu Guang only knew how to complain, he couldn't help but feel angry. He thought to himself, if they can attack, can't you guys fight back? However, he naturally couldn't say such words. After all, the mercenaries were considered allies. Moreover, he still wanted to recruit them for his own use. If he really said such words, it would be impossible to recruit them. But no matter what kind of plan he had in mind, since the mercenaries had come knocking on his door, he still had to show his toughness. Otherwise, wouldn't he be looked down upon by others? After softly reprimanding Yu Guang, Ma Wei's gaze landed on Luo Pa, following which he sneered, "Isn't this Commander Luo? What's going on? What happened to provoke you to bring an army to surround my magistrate's office? If you can't give me an explanation for this matter, even if you are mercenaries, you will still have to pay the price." Looking at Luo Pa, who was chatting enthusiastically with everyone a while ago, General Ma Wei put down his pride. At that time, he wanted to recruit Luo Pa and wanted some temporary auxiliary soldiers to join his side. Naturally, he could say any kind of soft words and lower his head to anything. However, it was different now. The other party had already killed their way to him. If he still lowered his head, he would be seen as weak. Pay the price? I think you are the ones who have to pay the price. Facing Ma Wei, who was about to flip out, Luo Pa didn't have the slightest bit of fear. He still had his head held high. What? Do you really think you are invincible? Please remember, this is the Southern Ming Empire's territory. How can you be so arrogant in our territory? Men surround them. Ma Wei saw that Luo Pa still didn't give up even after he had stepped forward. He immediately became angry. No matter what, he was still a general of the Guangdong Guards, a dignified third-grade military general, since he didn't give him any face. So what if he fought to the death? Lord Guan and Wei Guang have arrived. Just when Luo Pa was about to retaliate and the soldiers on both sides were about to go to war, a shout came from outside the door. Then Guan Ying and Wei Guang each brought a few subordinates into the courtyard. You came at the right time. The arrival of these two people made Ma Wei sigh in relief. Just now, he was the only one who had to maintain the situation. Now that these two people were here, there was someone to discuss what to do. Most importantly, if something happened, there would be someone to take the blame. You came at the right time. To Ma Wei's surprise, Luo Pa wasn't afraid when he saw the arrival of these two people. Instead, he looked very happy. He even waved his hand and let Lang Feng, who was guarding here, open a path for the two people to lead the soldiers into the courtyard. Guan Ying and Wei Guang. One was an official of the Ministry of War and the other was a Guang of the Brocade Guards. They didn't usually stay in the government office. They came after receiving the news. As the two walked into the courtyard, they frowned and looked at their surroundings with a puzzled expression. What is going on? Commander Luo is also here? I don't know if you can give a reasonable explanation. Even if we treat the mercenaries as friends and allies, you can't do things that hurt each other's feelings for no reason. Guan Ying was still calm and wasn't very angry. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and asked. No one knew what he was thinking. Guan Ying was very clear about the combat strength of the mercenaries. There were only 1,000 Ming soldiers in Gaozhou. If they really fought, they wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between the enemy's teeth. But even so, even if he lost, he didn't lose. Even if he died, he would be a ghost who understood the situation. Just as Guan Ying finished speaking calmly, Wei Guang opened his mouth and said, What is going on? Can't you see? Moving soldiers into the city without orders is already a violation of the laws of the Ming dynasty. No matter what the reason is, we can't let it go. This was a preemptive strike. Wei Guang, who knew what he had done, spoke in an interrogative tone. He wanted to muddy the waters and put the blame on the other party first. In this way, he would have the initiative in his hands. When Guan Ying heard Wei Guang's words, he frowned. This was clearly putting the blame on them. Wouldn't this be forcing the mercenaries to do something extreme? If this was the case, no one present would be in a good mood, especially since the Min King's faction was very powerful. Even Guangdong was divided into two. If they were to create such a powerful enemy like the mercenaries, the Southern Ming dynasty would really be finished. This was no longer a matter of face. It was a matter of whether the Southern Ming dynasty could survive or not. Guan Ying was naturally careful. He glared at Wei Guang, warning him not to speak carelessly. Then he looked towards Luo Pa and said, "Commander Luo, this official believes that there must be a reason for you to come here and mobilize so many people. However, may I know what it is for?" Seeing that Guan Ying's words were still considered polite, Luo Pa nodded. "All right, since Lord Guan wants to get to the bottom of this, then this commander will tell you. Just over 2 hours ago, one of our mercenary soldiers went missing in the city. This is a provocation to our mercenary army. You must give us an explanation for this matter, otherwise we can only investigate it ourselves. Even if we have to turn the entire city upside down, we must have a conclusion to this matter." A soldier of the mercenaries went missing? Hearing this result, Guan Ying's face was filled with shock. Not only him, even General Ma Wei, who was confused just now, had his mouth wide open. He stood there with an incredulous expression. Wei Guang's heart skipped a beat. His guess was right. These people came for Lu Jian. However, he didn't expect that they would mobilize so many people just because one person went missing. Presumably, that person must know a lot of secrets. As long as he could get through this hurdle, he would be able to obtain first-hand information about the mercenaries. Looking at it this way, all the risks were worth it. Of course, whether the matter would have the result he wanted, it would depend on whether he could get through this hurdle or not. If he could get through it safely, then everything would be easy to discuss. Thinking of this, Wei Guang took half a step forward. He pointed at Luo Pa and said, "What? You lost one person and you come looking for us? What kind of logic is this? Who knows if your soldiers are deserters because they're afraid of war? We won't take the blame for this." Seeing Wei Guang jump out first, Luo Pa's expression didn't change. He only said sternly, "Wei Guang, please be careful with your words. Our mercenaries will not have any deserters. Don't use your subordinates' methods on us brothers. You can't bear the consequences." Being threatened again, Wei Guang's expression was naturally very ugly. "Luo Pa, you should also watch your words. I am a member of the embroidered uniform guard. Outsiders have no right to order me around." Chapter 421. Everyone, please don't get angry. Guan Yingyan saw that Wei Guang's tone was not friendly. He was afraid that if this continued, the two sides would fight before the matter was cleared up. If that happened, the truth would never be revealed. Therefore, he stood up and wanted to be a peacemaker. "Commander Luo," Wei Guang's attitude may not be very good, but what he said is the truth. You want to search the entire city for one missing person. Isn't this too much? If the final result is that you still can't find the person you're looking for after turning the city upside down, how will you explain it then? Facing Guan Yingyan's question, Luo Pa still shook his head expressionlessly. "I can't guarantee whether I can find him or not, but I'm also acting on orders. If anyone dares to stop me, then they are my enemy. It's that simple, so I hope you can make it easy." Acting on orders. The moment these 4 words were said, Guan Yingyan, Ma Wei, and Wei Guang's expressions all changed dramatically. Who was Luo Pa? He was the commander of the mercenary army, the most elite commander of the Cold Front. It could be said that he was the highest officer of this mercenary army. If even he had to say that he was acting on orders, then the answer to whose orders he was acting on seemed to be right in front of them. Zhongdang Duke is here?" Guan Yingyan asked as he took a deep breath in his heart. "Yes, he's here." "Zhongdang Duke, please." Luo Pa nodded. His task was originally to surround the 3 lords and the many Ming soldiers here. Since he had already done that, then the next stage was not his own stage, but to be handed over to the 6th young master. Following Luo Pa's loud shout, a carriage, under the protection of many able-bodied men, slowly drove into the inner courtyard from the outside. Before this, all the obstacles that prevented the carriage from moving had been cleaned up. In the cellar of the small courtyard, Lu Si, dressed in the uniform of the brocade guard, was still interrogating Lu Jian, who was beaten black and blue and covered in blood. "Brother, we were still a family 500 years ago. Just say what you want to say. Why do you have to suffer like this? It really makes my heart ache." Lu Ci's voice echoed in Lu Jian's ears. Lu Jian, who was tied up, opened his eyes with great difficulty. His eyelashes fluttered and he seemed to be mumbling something. Seeing that Lu Jian was about to speak, Lu Ci hurriedly moved his face closer, wanting to hear what was being said. Suddenly, a mouthful of saliva flew towards his face. Completely caught off guard, Lu Ci was spat all over his face. When he sensed that there was blood in the saliva, he wiped it away forcefully before glaring angrily. "Brat, you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being impolite. Next, I'll make you beg for death. Men continue the torture." Lu Ci was so enraged that he ignored Lu Jian's injuries and wanted to torture him. He wanted to see if this person was made of iron. Did he really not know what pain was? Boom! Just as he finished speaking, an embroidered uniform guard approached step by step with a thin whip that was dipped in salt water. Suddenly, the cellar door was broken from the outside. Following that, a powerful man appeared in their line of sight. The man was tall and muscular, and his muscular body gave people a feeling of explosive power. As soon as he appeared, he charged forward like a mad bull. First, the embroidered uniform guard with the whip only saw a black shadow getting bigger and bigger in his eyes. Then, before he could do anything to dodge, he felt a sharp pain all over his body. It was as if all his ribs were broken at this moment. His whole body flew backwards because of this. With just one collision, he heavily injured an embroidered uniform guard. Following that, the black shadow rushed towards Lu Ci. The sudden change was too fast. It was so fast that Lu Ci only managed to grab the spring embroidered saber at his waist with his right hand before his whole body flew backwards. His ears were filled with the whistling sound of the wind. Only when he hit the wall behind him did he stop. He felt as if all the bones in his body had fallen apart. With a plop, he fell to the ground. In just 2 rounds, the intruder had completely controlled the situation in the cellar. This result made everyone clap their hands in satisfaction. Then they lightly spat out 4 words, unable to withstand a single blow. The cellar door was once again opened from the outside. Wolf Fong Captain Tai, who brought Skinny Monkey, and the others out. When he saw the situation in front of him, Skinny Monkey chuckled. "Not bad. Violent ape is indeed violent. You finished the battle so quickly. Humph. It's just that these people are too incompetent." Violent ape said unconcernedly. He looked as if he hadn't had enough fun yet. "All right, let's save them first. Then we'll capture these 2 people and bring them to the young master." Tai, who saw that the situation had been settled, the problem in the cellar had been solved. The Ghost Shadow Sniper team had taken action outside and killed all the other embroidered uniform guards. The danger no longer existed. He also let out a sigh of relief. After all, this time they were facing the elite embroidered uniform guards. Moreover, they had hostages in the hands of the other party. If they were careless, it could cause extremely serious consequences and disappoint the young master. Fortunately, the other party wasn't on guard. In addition, they were well prepared. With the help of the Ghost Sniper team, the problem was solved smoothly. At this time, Lu Ci still had some strength in his body. He heard Tai, whose voice in his ears. Immediately, he shouted loudly, "I'm from the Imperial Court's embroidered uniform guards. Who are you? Who allowed you to do this? Do you know that this is a crime that will lead to the confiscation of your family's property and the extermination of your family? You talk too much nonsense." Lu Ci was still shouting. Skinny Monkey had already walked over impatiently. He lifted his foot and lightly kicked Lu Ci. In an instant, Lu Ci stopped moving. Obviously, this kick had knocked him out. The inner court of the magistrate's office. As the luxurious carriage drove in, it quickly began to clear the place. All unrelated people were kicked out. Even the bodyguards beside Guaning, Ma Wei, and Wei Guang were not left behind. Regarding this, the three naturally wanted to resist. However, when Qiu Vi led the first guard team to attack, Pang Yu, Ba Daojiang, and the other team members attacked together. How could those people be a match for them? They were either beaten to the ground or half kneeling on the ground with bloody noses and swollen faces. In short, there wasn't a single good person. Seeing that the strength of his subordinates was so weak, Guaning straightforwardly ordered everyone to leave. Since they couldn't win, it was better not to test the waters. It would be embarrassing. The inner court finally quieted down, other than the three so-called Southern Ming officials and the first guard team. There was also the luxurious carriage that had been parked there without any movement. After calming down, Guaning decided to face everything that had happened. He cupped his fist and asked in a very respectful tone, "Is the Duke of Loyalty in the carriage?" "It's me." After a short pause, a voice finally came from the carriage. Then the curtain was pulled open by Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, revealing Yang Qindong, who was wearing a green robe inside. Compared to the last time they met, Yang Qindong's face was pale, his eyes were dull, and his cheekbones seemed to be protruding a little. It was as if he had completely changed into a different person. He was much older. "Duke of Loyalty? What's going on? Why are you so sick?" Seeing Yang Qindong's appearance, Guaning was really shocked. He asked in disbelief, I was careless. I was poisoned a while ago. Fortunately, God blessed me. The mercenaries sent me a divine pill to detoxify the poison. That was how I managed to save my life." Yang Qindong's face was pale as he forced a smile, but what followed was a series of rapid coughs. It gave people the feeling that he had tuberculosis and would die from coughing at any time. Yang Qindong's appearance naturally shocked Guaning and Ma Wei. At first, they thought that he was looking for an excuse to not meet them because he was sick. But after a long time, they couldn't help but have all kinds of guesses. But in the end, they didn't expect his condition to be so serious. It looked as if he would die at any time. On the other hand, Wei Guang's expression didn't change. On the contrary, he was secretly delighted. What was going on? He probably had the clearest judgment in his heart. This time, he came to Gaozhou Prefecture to see how Yang Qindong's condition was. He didn't expect that after not getting an answer for a long time, he would see hope when he thought there was no hope. Just by looking at it, the Duke of Loyalty was indeed seriously injured. It was the result of Su Maner's attack. But what Wei Guang didn't expect was that if she attacked, he should be dead. How could he still be alive? Could it be that it was like what was said just now, that it was a divine antidote sent by the mercenaries? If that was the case, how many good things did the mercenaries have that they didn't take out? While Wei Guang was still pondering over the crux of the matter, Yang Qindong had already opened his mouth once again. "Sirs, this time the mercenaries had no choice but to act. As you all know, the mercenaries are very protective of their people. Anyone who dares to provoke them will not have a good ending. Now that a person has gone missing, and I heard that it's an officer, it's reasonable that they would be angry. How about this? I will be the middleman and give everyone a chance. If anyone is the one who captured him, stand up and ask for forgiveness now. I can even consider interceding for him. Maybe he can still live. This way, everyone won't be affected. How about it?" As if he forced himself to say these words, Yang Qindong sat in the carriage and panted heavily. Tiger's Mane, who was waiting on him at the side, was anxious. Just a moment ago, the young master was still talking and laughing with them. How long had it been? How could his illness be so serious? This didn't seem like an act. How could an act be so realistic? Chapter 4:22. In his anxiety, Tiger's Mane continued to say, "Young master, your health is more important. You should speak less. Cough, young master, I don't want to come out sick, but the bigger picture is more important. I really don't want to see any conflict between the mercenary army and the great Ming dynasty. Yang Qindong struggled to say these words, and then he coughed heavily. Okay, young master, we understand. We understand. They also heard it. Tiger's Mane nodded repeatedly, then suddenly turned around and looked at Guanning, Ma Wei, and Wei Guang. He said, "You all heard it clearly. The Duke said that whoever did it should stand up. Don't implicate others and don't hurt the relationship between the mercenary army and the great Ming dynasty." Tiger's Mane's words made Guanning and the other two look at each other. At least Guanning and Ma Wei didn't want to have any conflicts with the mercenary army, especially when the King of Min's faction was so rampant and crazily expanding. This elite army might be of great use. However, they really didn't know where the missing mercenary soldiers went. Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but we really don't know where the mercenary soldiers went. How do you want us to hand them over? Is there a misunderstanding? Guanning said in a weak tone. That's right. Is there some misunderstanding? Ma Wei chimed in with an innocent look. I think this must be a misunderstanding. You guys are just trying to frame someone. Duke of Loyalty and Courage, we respect your contributions to the Southern Ming dynasty, but you can't ignore us because of this. Let me tell you, this is disrespectful to the Southern Ming dynasty. Wei Guang opened his mouth, and his tone was interrogative. His overbearing attitude was full of arrogance. Bang! Wei Guang, who was speaking, suddenly tilted his body, and then he half knelt on the ground. Then he clenched his teeth in pain, and cold sweat poured down. A gunshot was fired. The one who fired the shot was naturally Yang Qindong. He didn't seem to like the noise, or maybe he was angry that the other party called him Duke of Loyalty and Courage instead of Duke of Loyalty and Courage. In short, he had fired the gun. When the gunshot rang out, Guanning and Ma Wei were shocked. Then they saw that the one who was shot was Wei Guang, and a stream of dark red blood was flowing out from his trousers. Their faces immediately changed. Loyal Duke? What are you doing? Dare I ask, what did Wei Chan do to make you want to kill him? It was Ma Wei who asked. Then Guanning also expressed his stance. Duke Xiongdan, no matter what it is, we can sit down and have a good talk. If you do this, I really can't explain it to the higher-ups. You've caused trouble. Guanning and Ma Wei had such an attitude because of Wei Guang's noble status. They were members of the embroidered uniform guards, and even they had to be courteous to them. Secondly, he was also considered an official of the imperial court. If he attacked an official for no reason, and did it in public, he would definitely be held accountable. Yang Qindong was no longer an imperial envoy. He no longer had the power to control the Southern Ming officials at any time. Got into trouble? Yes, I did get into trouble, but it's not me, it's him. Yang Qindong's voice rang out again. Tiger's Mane, have they arrived? Bring them up. Yes, Tiger's Mane replied. He turned around and saw Chiu Vi lightly nodding. Good, bring them up. Yang Qindong's calmness and Tiger's Mane's unhurried manner fell into the eyes of Guanning, Ma Wei, and the kneeling Wei Guang, causing them to have a look of confusion. Only Ma Wei's heart involuntarily skipped a beat. Then he shook his head forcefully. It was impossible. The place where Lu Jian was imprisoned was very hidden. It was impossible to find him so quickly. Besides, he had already instructed Lu Si to silence him if things went wrong. What was there to be afraid of? It must be something else. Yes, it must be. Comforting himself, Wei Guang's expression became much calmer. When he raised his head again, he had already recovered his initial calmness. However, all of this calmness instantly crumbled when he saw the people being escorted in. Lu Si, who was wearing a turquoise brocade robe, was escorted out. At the same time, a few brocade guard brothers who had stayed behind to guard the courtyard were also escorted out. Wei Guang could even name these people. As soon as they appeared, he felt as if his head had been blown off. The person who was brought over was indeed Lu Si. Originally, his head had been lowered, thinking that he was definitely going to die. However, when he raised his head and saw Wei Guang, who was wearing a large red python robe, a flying fish robe, a black gauze hat, a belt around his waist, and an embroidered spring saber at his waist, his originally dim and lifeless eyes instantly lit up. "Boss, save me, save me. They saved Lu Jian and killed a few of our brothers," Lu Si's shouts continued. But at this time, everyone's gaze naturally fell on Wei Guang. Even Guan Ying and Ma Wei, who did not know what had happened before, understood at this moment what had happened. They also finally knew that someone had kidnapped the mercenary soldiers, and the mastermind behind this was Wei Guang. The soldiers were kidnapped. No wonder the mercenaries were so angry and mobilized so many people. At this moment, Guan Ying and Ma Wei seemed to understand the mercenaries' actions. However, their understanding was one thing, and they would definitely not express any opinions on this matter. The Brocade Guard was one of the most trusted subordinates of the emperor. How could others meddle with it? Even if they did something wrong, there would definitely be someone from above to vouch for them. It was not something that military officials of their level could interfere. Since they could not interfere, they could only stand aside and watch the show. From a certain point of view, Guan Ying and Ma Wei were even happy to see Wei Guang suffer. "Shut up!" Hearing that Lu Si's shouts had no intention of stopping, Wei Guang endured the gunshot wound on his leg and yelled loudly. Then he looked at Yang Qindong in the luxurious carriage and said with a strong appearance, "That's right, we captured him. It was only because he violated the laws of the Ming dynasty that we had to capture him. But you guys, why did you dare to kill the brothers of the Brocade Guard? Do you know how big of a crime this is?" Bang! Just as Wei Guang wanted to gain the upper hand by a show of strength and wanted to question Yang Qindong, another gunshot rang out. The unprepared Wei Guang's left leg was also shot. He was originally half kneeling, but now he was completely kneeling on both knees and became shorter. How bold! Capturing a mercenary soldier for no reason and still daring to argue with reason. You really deserve to be killed. Yang Qindong's face turned ashen. Perhaps it was because his body was too weak or because he was really angry, but his face gave people a terrifying feeling. When Yang Qindong said that he deserved to be killed, Tiger's Mane nodded his head and nodded towards Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu of the First Guard team. The two of them strode to the kneeling Wei Guang and lifted him into the air with one arm each. "Ah, what are you doing? What are you doing?" "I am the commander of the Brocade Guard, Qian Shi. I was personally appointed by the emperor. I am an official of the imperial court. You have no right to do anything to me, no." As if he felt something, Wei Guang struggled and shouted loudly, explaining the severity of the situation. "Deal with them one by one, from small to large cough." Yang Qindong didn't pay attention to the shouting Wei Guang, but after saying this to Hu Mang, he leaned back, gasping, and his chest was constantly undulating at this moment. "Young master, you need to take care of your body." Hu Mang blurted out this sentence unconsciously. It seemed that Yang Qindong's acting was too good, and he was speaking from his own feelings. However, Guan Ying and Ma Wei, who were about to plead for leniency, shut their mouths when they heard this. Yang Qindong was sick like this. Logically speaking, he should be recuperating, but he still walked out. This showed how important this matter was. Wei Guang brought this upon himself. If they pleaded now, it would seem that this matter had something to do with them. But who knew if the angry Yang Qindong would take care of them as well? Since it was none of his business, he could just let it go. If there were any benefits to be gained from telling him, he could still take the risk and give it a try. But the people of the embroidered uniform guards had always been ungrateful. Even if they spoke up for him now, when they committed a crime in the future, they would not be lenient. If that was the case, why take the risk? No one spoke up for Wei Guang and the others. Tiger's Mane was naturally more straightforward when it came to doing things. First, he and Beta Persei each took a machete. Then, They came in front of the ordinary embroidered uniform guards who were brought here. With a raise of their right arm, their heads were separated from their bodies. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei took turns to kill the other embroidered uniform guards. When it was Beta Persei's turn to raise his machete to kill Lucy, he actually wet his pants. Then he shouted loudly, "Don't kill me, I know who poisoned the Duke of Loyalty." Beta Persei, who had already raised his machete and was about to swing it down, suddenly stopped. It was as if he had been immobilized. "Lucy, do you not want to live any more? Aren't you afraid that all 9 generations of your family will be executed?" Wei Guang, who was still emphasizing his identity to intimidate others not to touch him, suddenly heard Lu Ci's words. His expression changed drastically, and cold sweat flowed down his face. As a trusted aide, Lu Ci had heard Wei Guang mention when he was drunk about the plan of the commander sending Sima Nair to kill Yang Qindong. After he sobered up, Wei Guang even thought of silencing him. But at that time, Lu Ci knelt on the ground and swore that he would never speak of this matter. Otherwise, he would die a horrible death. In the end, Wei Guang spared his subordinate's life. Perhaps he also thought that Lu Ci would not dare to speak of such an important matter because, once it was spread, he would definitely die. Chapter 4:23. But who would have thought that he would finally say it in front of so many people? The consequences would be unimaginable. Wei Guang still wanted to say something to scare him, but Peng Yu and Ba Daojiang, who were sandwiching him, received a signal from Tiger's Mane, and each of them punched him in the stomach. The intense pain made him shut his mouth immediately and groan in pain. Wei Guang did not speak, but Lu Ci stood there and laughed loudly. "Execute my entire family? I'm sorry, but my ancestral home is Yunnan's Cheli department. When the Min king rebelled, everyone in my family was killed. No one was spared, so I'm the only one left. What's there to be afraid of?" Lu Ci seemed to be venting something. After shouting, he suddenly turned to look at the side of the carriage and fell to his knees. "This lowly one is Lu Ci, serving in the brocade guard. I have done many heinous things. I know that I have sinned deeply. However, the heavens are virtuous. I want to turn over a new leaf and start anew. I hope that the Duke of Loyalty can give this lowly one a chance. The heavens are indeed benevolent. Tell me everything you know. As long as it's true, I'll let you live. I'll even give you enough money to live the rest of your life. But remember, don't try to bite me. Otherwise, don't blame my gun for not recognizing you." Cough, cough. Yang Qindong's voice slowly came out. Then the carriage turned around and faced the direction where Lu Ci knelt on the ground. As the carriage turned around, he gave a signal to Tiger's Mane. "Thank you, Duke of Loyalty, for your understanding," Lu Ci said with a slightly emotional tone. He believed that since the Duke of Loyalty had made a promise in front of so many people, his life should be saved. With the thought of surviving a calamity, he raised his head and said loudly, "Loyal Duke, the people who wanted to take your life were the embroidered, uniform guards. They were afraid that your contributions were too great and would endanger the Emperor. Pucci!" Lu Ci seemed to want to continue speaking, but a steel saber had already pierced through his back. The tip of the saber continued to drip blood after piercing through his chest. Lu Ci used the last of his strength to look sideways. When he saw that the person who killed him was actually his superior, Wei Guang, there was a strong unwillingness in his eyes. After smacking his lips twice, he leaned back heavily with his eyes staring at the sky. He couldn't be more dead than he already was. The person who killed Lu Ci was Wei Guang. Just now, for some reason, Peng Yu and Ba Daojiang, who were originally holding him down, suddenly loosened their grip, giving him a chance to catch his breath. Then he heard Lu Ci's voice. How could Wei Guang listen to him when he was telling the truth? Lu Ci no longer had any relatives. Naturally, he was not afraid of being executed. However, his family members were all in Nanjing. If something really happened to them and he died, what about his family members? For his family, Wei Guang, who forced himself to take a breath, suddenly flew up and used the last trace of internal qi in his body to stab Lu Si, who was telling the truth, through his heart. Lu Si was finally dead, although before he died he said that it was the genie guards who killed Yang Qindong. Fortunately, he didn't say the real mastermind behind the scenes. Everything was delayed. Wei Guang let out a long sigh of relief in his heart. When he raised his head to look at Yang Qindong, his voice was fierce and resolute as he said, "That's right, I did it. I arranged for someone to poison you. I just didn't expect your life to be so tough that you still didn't die. But it doesn't matter. It seems that you only have half of your life left. Haha, you will spend the rest of your life in pain. In this way, my goal has been achieved. I have achieved it." After saying this, Wei Guang, who was laughing, suddenly put the spring embroidery saber across his neck, as if he was going to die. "Hurry up and take the saber." Yang Qindong shouted anxiously, but in the end it was still too late. Without waiting for the others to do anything, the saber had already slit its owner's neck. Then blood splattered. Wei Guang fell to the ground with a plop, without a trace of life or breath. Wei Guang had committed suicide. This scene made Guaning and Ma Wei's hearts jump. The change in front of their eyes was so fast that it was completely out of their expectations. However, they quickly calmed down and thought through everything. For Guaning, he even had a draft in his mind on how he was going to report today's matter to the court. It was nothing more than Wei Guang, who was jealous of the Duke of Loyalty's contributions, sending people to poison him. Then, seeing that he didn't die, he sent people to capture the mercenary soldiers, wanting to know how deeply the Duke of Loyalty had been poisoned. However, everything was discovered by the Duke of Loyalty. Then he committed suicide in front of everyone. Regardless of what Guan Ying and Ma Wei thought, after seeing Wei Guang commit suicide, the resentment in Yang Qindong's heart could be considered to have been vented a little. Suma Nair had already said that the person who arranged for her to come to Yang Qindong's side and asked her to wait for an opportunity to make a move. The person who sent the poison bun was the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, Menda. This time, Wei Guang came to the sect to clarify this matter. The embroidered uniform guards were the emperor's personal guards. Only the emperor had the authority to kill the people there. Otherwise, no matter how heinous the crime was, it wasn't something that others could casually touch. It was the same for Yang Qindong. Although he already had a certain level of strength and could be said to be above many other officials, if he killed Wei Guang, it would be equivalent to giving Zhu Qijin a big slap in the face. Yang Qindong wasn't willing to do such a thankless thing unless it was absolutely necessary. As such, Wei Guang committing suicide was naturally the best outcome. As for why he was able to break free from Peng Yu and Ba Daozhang's restraints and kill Lu Si with his crippled legs, it was naturally the result after Yang Qindong gave Tiger's mane a hint with his eyes. In these few years, the tacit understanding between the two was still very strong. Yang Qindong didn't need Lu Si to tell the truth because he already knew the truth. On the other hand, if the truth was revealed, would he seek revenge on Menda? If he did, would Zhu Qijin have any thoughts and allow such a thing to happen? As such, this was the current scene. Wei Guang killed Lu Si and then committed suicide. Yang Qindong could remove himself from this matter completely and also take the opportunity to knock Menda and Zhu Qijin down, letting them know how difficult it was to kill him. This time they were lucky to pass, but they might not be so lucky next time. Since his goal had been achieved, Yang Qindong naturally didn't need to stay here. Waving his hand, Tiger's mane and Beta Persei put down the curtains of the carriage, and then the large group of people left the magistrate court and Gaozhou prefecture. Along the way, neither Guaning nor Ma Wei stood out to say anything. Yang Qindong was indeed sick, and it was quite serious. This was all seen with their own eyes. Not to mention, this illness was poisoned by the brocade guards. As such, how could they still ask Yang Qindong to leave with the mercenaries? Not to mention, now that the King of Min was powerful, they still pointed at Yang Qindong in their hearts as a shield. They believed that with the existence of these mercenaries, even if the King of Min wanted to conquer Gao, Zhou, and Laizhou, he would have to consider the strength of these mercenaries first. They successfully returned to their own military camp. Yang Qindong was completely different from before. His illness had long disappeared, and when he appeared in front of everyone, he was full of energy. "How is Lu Jian?" Yang Qindong asked Tiger's Mane as he walked towards the infirmary. "Young master, Lu Jian only suffered some superficial injuries. He will be fine after a good rest." "Oh yes, he didn't say anything when he was tortured by the brocade guards. He is really a tough man," Tiger's Mane said with a face full of admiration. "Not bad. No wonder he can become the platoon leader of the auxiliary troops. Tell him that after he recovers, let him report to the Cold Front Regiment. He has already passed the loyalty test." Yang Qindong nodded satisfactorily, then opened the tent of the infirmary. He saw Lu Jian, who had already fainted, but his facial features still gave off a sense of determination. Looking at Lu Jian, who was almost covered in wounds, Yang Qindong sighed and said, "Look, this is our warrior. How brave and tenacious. This is a true man. Tell all the Cold Front Regiment and auxiliary troops to learn from Lu Jian. Also, give Lu Jian a silver medal. This is the reward he deserves." Hearing about the silver medal, Tiger's Mane nodded heavily. "That is indeed the case. I will pass down the young master's order immediately." At this moment, Lu Jian was still in a coma. However, if he woke up and heard these words, he would definitely be extremely excited. One must know that the military medal not only represented personal glory, but it could also be converted into cash when faced with difficulties. This was set by Yang Qindong before he announced the medal system. This was because he was afraid that the country's heroes would face difficulties one day. If that really happened, a high-grade medal could be exchanged for a large amount of silver, enough to solve most problems and difficulties. 1451 AD, late July. After more than 10 days of bumpy travel, Kuang Yi, the southern Ming Crown Prince and Minister of War, finally arrived at Gaozhou Prefecture of Guangdong. The reason why it was a few turns was because some of the cities from Nanjing to here were already occupied by the King of Min. He had to change his route several times along the way. Kuang Ye's entry into Gaozhou Prefecture was a secret. Even his journey was very secretive. No one knew if the King of Min had placed any spies in southern Ming. If the route was made public, who knew how many times he would have to face assassination? It was even uncertain if he could safely reach Gaozhou Prefecture. Because it was hidden, when Kuang Yi suddenly appeared in Gaozhou Prefecture, it really shocked Guanning and Ma Wei. Chapter 4:24. The journey was too long, and the journey was not peaceful. The news that Kuang Yi had regained his power and was promoted half a rank hadn't reached here yet. So when he saw Kuang Yi appear, Guan Ying's face was full of shock. His first feeling was that his teacher had been kicked out of the capital by Yingzong. "Greetings, Lord Kuang." Ma Wei also broke out in a cold sweat. He also didn't know what had happened to this old minister recently. However, since he was here, he still had to be respectful. After leaving here, he would immediately send someone to the capital to find out more about Kuang Yi. Kuang Ye's eyes fell on the two's expressions. This old man, who was over 60 years old, was extremely wise and farsighted. With a single glance, he saw through the two's thoughts. Chuckling, he said, "Generals, there is no need to be surprised. This old man came to Gaozhou Prefecture under the Emperor's orders. All right. The Emperor empathized with my loyalty and bravery, and specially conferred me the title of Grand Tutor to the Crown Prince." Guan Yingma became excited when he heard the Crown Prince's words. He clasped his hands and said, "Congratulations, teacher. Congratulations, Lord Kuang. Ma Wei also quickly changed the way he addressed Kuang Yi. He no longer called him Lord Kuang like before, but Minister Kuang. Congratulations to you too. Kuang Ye's wrinkled face smiled. He had seen Ma Wei's performance just now. His attitude towards these people was only perfunctory. Firstly, this was not a direct descendant that he had nurtured. And secondly, the other party was the commander of the Guangdong Guards, a martial official of the 3 ranks. If he was too close to the other party, once this news reached the court and reached the emperor's ears, who knew what kind of adverse effects it would bring. Maintaining a certain distance and only maintaining the relationship of a superior and subordinate was how an evergreen official should behave. Teacher, something happened a few days ago. I have secretly reported it to the imperial court, but I don't think you know about it. After the pleasantries, Guan Ying said carefully, "What is it?" Kuang Yi had a bad feeling when he heard that Guan Ying had secretly reported it to the imperial court. He knew that ordinary small matters couldn't be reported, especially when the situation was so unstable. Trivial matters couldn't be reported. He also understood Guan Ying's character. Guan Ying was far-sighted and would not be entangled over such a small matter. Now that Guan Ying had brought it up in such a serious manner, it could not be anything good. Teacher, Wei Guang of the Imperial Court's brocade guard has died. He committed suicide in front of us. The reason for his death was... Although he didn't know why Kuang Yi was here, given the current situation, if the Minister of War didn't stay in the capital to organize and command the army, but instead came to Gaozhou, a place that seemed like it was about to be abandoned. Something big must have happened. Based on his analysis and intuition, Guanning believed that it had something to do with Yang Qindong and the mercenaries. Therefore, he first told him about Yang Qindong being poisoned. Guanning was indeed capable. At the very least, he had good foresight. After he finished speaking, he saw the shock on Kuang Ye's face. Wait, what did you say? Was the Duke of Loyalty poisoned? Wei Guang even admitted that he did it? Well, Minister, you must be tired from traveling so far. I will go arrange for a banquet. When Ma Wei heard this, his expression changed again and again. He felt that the teacher and disciple had something important to talk about. It was really awkward for him to stand there with his status, so he found an excuse to leave. Kuang Yi was very satisfied with Ma Wei's tactfulness. However, his thoughts were more on Yang Qindong. Guanning, how is the Duke of Loyalty? Not too good. I took a look at him that day. His complexion was not good, and his body was very weak, Guanning answered honestly. Aya, what should we do? Hearing that Yang Qindong's body was in such a bad state, Kuang Ye's expression was full of hatred. He had seen Yang Qindong countless times. This kind of young man seemed to always have an inexhaustible amount of energy. Even a small illness would not affect his body. However, from Guan Ying's description, he seemed to be like a lamp that had run out of oil. One could imagine how severe the poison was. Thinking that the southern Ming Empire's hopes were mostly placed on Yang Qindong, if something really happened to him, there would be no link between the southern Ming Empire and the mercenary army. For the current situation, it was definitely not a good thing. He said angrily, "What do the imperial bodyguards want to do? Get rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness?" Wei Guang alone would not have such ability and courage. There must be someone behind him. However, they did not think about it. If something really happened to Yang Qindong, who would be able to quell the Min King's rebellion? The person behind this is really... At this point, Kuang Yi stopped talking because he suddenly thought of the person behind the Imperial Secret Service. For a big matter like dealing with Yang Qindong, without that person's permission, normal people would not have the guts to act on their own. Could it be that this was really his intention? Once the thought appeared in his mind, it could not be dismissed. Thinking about it carefully, that person did have a reason to act. Yang Qindong was ultimately too young and so capable. The existence of such a person was originally a huge threat and pressure. The emperor was still young, but once he grew old and that person was still alive, would his descendants be able to suppress Yang Qindong? If they could not, what would happen? What Yang Qindong lacked now was experience and enough merit. However, he was still young. Once he was given enough power, these could be made up for. Once he had everything he needed, it would be even more difficult to control him. This led to the poisoning incident after the Huang bandit army incident was over. It seemed to make more sense. There was another problem. If it was really his intention, why did he not tell him when he received the order to come this time? Even if it was just a hint, it would be good, right? He would not let him be in such a passive position, right? It wasn't impossible to think of other ways to solve this problem. Now that he had come to Gaozhou Prefecture and was seen by so many people, it would not be long before Yang Qindong received the news. When that time came, what should he do? If he did not meet the other party, how should he talk? The emperor was afraid of him and wanted to poison him. Would he still dare to put such a person in an important position? For a moment, countless questions rose in Kuang Ye's mind, causing him to feel a headache. He originally thought that after coming to Gaozhou Prefecture and seeing Yang Qindong and promising him many benefits, he would have a chance to persuade this person to help him. But now, it seemed that everything was going to be overturned. He also felt helpless. Teacher, teacher. Seeing that Kuang Yi seemed to be in a daze, Guanyin carefully called out to him, "HM, what's wrong?" Kuang Yi regained his senses and asked Guanyin, "Teacher, you must have an important mission for coming here this time, but I wonder what the mission is. If you want to put the Duke of Loyalty in an important position, shouldn't you reconsider?" Guanyin did not go into too much detail, but to smart people, there was no need to be so thorough. Many times, it was best to stop at a certain point. "That's right." Kuang Yi nodded, then said, "Come, bring me a brush and ink. This official wants to explain everything that happened here to the emperor, then send someone to send it out at the fastest speed possible." The news of Kuang Ye's arrival in Gaozhou Prefecture was immediately reported by the city's security bureau to the mercenary Camp 5, Li outside the city. Tiger's Mane excitedly brought the news to the military tent. When he saw Yang Qindong, he excitedly said, "Young master, Minister Kuang Yi is here." "Haha, as you expected, we will be of great use." "He's finally here?" After hearing this, Yang Qindong's expression was calm, as if everything was within his expectations. But then he shook his head. Things have changed. Wei Guang's death and the words that Lu Si said before he died. Even if we don't care, I'm afraid that others will. Sigh, it seems that if we want the plan to go smoothly, we have to continue pretending to be sick. Continue pretending to be sick? Why? Tiger's Mane asked with a puzzled expression. Tiger's Mane, young master, let me ask you. In your heart, are you afraid of a lively enemy or a sick enemy who could die at any time? Hearing Yang Qindong's question, Tiger's Mane was puzzled, but he still answered instinctively, "Of course it's a lively enemy. But what does this have to do with us?" Tiger's Mane, who had just finished speaking, immediately shut his mouth. Obviously, he had thought of something. Seeing Tiger's Mane's enlightened expression, Yang Qindong laughed and said, "Okay, you're not too stupid. Okay, go and inform the brothers in the first and second guards. Tell them that once Kuang Yi comes, tell them to act more angry and sad. As for what to do, go and teach them. I saw that your performance last time was very good." Hearing this new mission, Tiger's Mane said with a bitter face, "Young master, it's not that my performance was good, but your acting last time was too good. So much so that I believed it was true." "All right, then let's do as you say." Yang Qindong laughed loudly. He casually sent Tiger's Mane away, then picked up the pen and continued to write a letter home. The letter was written to Suma Nair, who had already been sent to Crimson City. The two of them had only been together for a short while, but because of some things they had no choice but to separate. They were like newlyweds. It was impossible to say that they did not miss each other. Of course, writing a letter to Suma Nair was not a privilege that only she enjoyed. For example, second Madame Chiao Yin and fourth Madame Lady Xiang, who were in the Yang family manor in the capital, would also communicate with Yang Qindong from time to time. Even Wan Xiaoyu, who had always been in Crimson City, would also communicate with Yang Qindong from time to time. But this time, when he wrote to Suma Nair, Yang Qindong did not say any words of love. Instead, he told her in detail about how he had pretended to be poisoned. He also said that he had arranged for people to keep an eye on the capital and Nanjing of the southern Ming dynasty. He wanted to see if there was anyone who could redress the Su family's reputation. If there was, then it was worth it for him to pretend to be sick. On the other hand, it would mean that the other party did not keep their promises. Since that was the case, he would have to seek justice himself. Chapter 4:25. Early the next morning, an unexpected guest arrived at the mercenaries' camp. Guan Ying and Ma Wei were standing behind the old man. As soon as they appeared, the gate of the mercenary camp was opened. Commander Luo came to greet them in person. "Greetings, Minister Kuang." Tiger's mane stepped forward and saluted. "My young master knew that you would come, so he asked me to wait here to greet you. Please come with me." "Okay." Kuang Yi nodded and then said to Guan Ying and Ma Wei behind him, "You two stay here. When you have time, you can learn how to lead troops from Commander Luo. I'm going to visit Duke Zhongdan. Teach her this." Guan Ying seemed to be worried and wanted to say something, but Kuang Yi waved his hand and then followed Tiger's mane to the depths of the camp. In the largest tent, Yang Qindong had finished his makeup, which made Huyen and Madame Shui exclaim in surprise. "Lu Lang, your skill is so powerful. It really looks like you have suffered a serious internal injury." Huyen looked amazed, and her hand couldn't help but touch Yang Qindong's face. Yang Qindong quickly dodged to the left and right to avoid her touch. Yang Qindong had practiced the art of makeup a lot in his previous life. Sometimes, in order to complete a task, he had to disguise himself as various people. Not only did he have to look good, but he also had to learn how to disguise himself. Otherwise, how could he fool others? "Yes, my husband looks so haggard now. If I didn't know the truth, I would believe it." Madame Shui also stared at Yang Qindong's face, trying to find a flaw. However, no matter how hard she looked, she couldn't find the problem. It seemed that Yang Qindong was really sick. No matter how thick-skinned he was, Yang Qindong felt a little embarrassed when the two women stared at him like this. He changed the topic and said, "Your husband is well prepared. It will depend on your performance later. You always talk about how good you are at acting. This time it's time to test you. Don't screw up." "What do you mean by screw up?" Huyen asked with interest. It means don't screw up," Yang Qindong explained awkwardly. "Oh, then we won't let you down," Huyen and Madame Shui said in unison. They understood what Madame Shui said. At this moment, Beta Persei rushed in. "Young master, Tiger's Head and Minister Qi are here." "Oh." As soon as he said this, there was a sad cry. Who else could it be but Huyen and Madame Shui? The show began. After a smile appeared on Yang Qindong's mouth, his body also lay down on the bed. It seemed that even breathing was very laborious. Yang Air stared at the scene in front of him with his mouth agape. He thought to himself, as expected, birds of a feather flock together. Look, this family is full of acting experts. I still have to learn from them, but I don't know if I can learn a thing or two from them in this life. Outside the tent, Hu Mang finally led Kuan Yi into the tent, and what he saw was this very sad scene. There were cries and sighs, and there was even blood in the spittoon beside the bed. It seemed that Yang Qindong had just vomited blood not long ago. "Aya, loyal and courageous Duke, how did you become like this?" Even though he was mentally prepared, he had heard Guan Ying explain Yang Qindong's condition in detail yesterday. But this morning he still came to take a look because he was worried. Originally, he came with doubts, but the moment he entered the tent, the situation changed completely. He even felt sad for some reason. He could not help but think that some people were too much. This was a hero of the southern Ming Empire. How could they treat him like this? Beta Persei lowered his head and said nothing. He moved a chair to the side of the bed, as if to let Kuang Yi sit down. But the sound of the chair slamming on the ground showed his attitude towards Kuang Yi. He was extremely unwelcome. Beta Persei, don't be rude. Yang Qindong, who was on the bed, opened his eyes with great effort and scolded softly. Then he forced a smile and said to Kuang Yi, Minister Qi is here. Hurry, take a seat. You can leave too. Cough, cough, cough. With the help of Hu Yan and Lady Shui, Yang Qindong got up with great effort and sat down with his back against a large futon. Then Hu Yan and the others tactfully left. Beta Persei did not want to leave, but Yang Qindong said, You can leave. Minister Qi is a good person. He won't harm me. Beta Persei reluctantly left the tent. Kuang Ye's face turned red when he heard that he wouldn't harm him. Of course, he knew what Yang Qindong meant. Kuang Yi felt sad when he thought about how the originally handsome and lively young man had been plotted against and ended up like this. He thought about how he had been wronged when he was ordered to stay at home to recuperate. The words, Heaven's might is unpredictable, involuntarily entered Kuang Ye's heart. Although he felt indignant, in Kuang Ye's heart, the emperor was the emperor. He could not let anyone question him, not even himself. After suppressing the complicated emotions in his heart, he looked at Yang Qindong with a face full of concern. Duke Xiongdan, regarding the matter of Wei Guang's poisoning, I have already written an urgent letter to the capital. I will definitely give you an explanation. Forget it. He's already dead. Besides, Minister Kuang, do you really think he has the guts to do all this? Yang Qindong's question hit the nail on the head, leaving Kuang Yi speechless. If he said no, it would be the same as criticizing the emperor. If he said yes, it would be an insult to his and Yang Qindong's intelligence. This was a question that couldn't be answered and couldn't be answered. Kuang Yi sighed and did not dwell on this question. Instead, he spoke in a comforting tone for Yang Qindong. Duke Xiongdan, you have been wronged recently. I also heard that some people are still calling you Duke of Loyalty and Courage. I was angry about this and gave the order. Although your title of Duke of Loyalty and Courage was given by King Yu, since we have recognized him as the Daizong, his title is naturally reasonable. If anyone dares to call him that in the future, you can punish them. Kuang Yi was trying to comfort Yang Qindong by saying that he was on Yang Qindong's side. However, he was only on Yang Qindong's side psychologically. Many people would often say, You are a good person, and I support you spiritually. However, Yang Qindong did not need such a good person card. Politics was not a game. It was not a matter of good for you, good for me, good for everyone. In order to achieve their own ideals, those who opposed could become mortal enemies. It was common to even fight with swords. Just because you're a good person, how can you lower your head and accept everything when you've been wronged? Therefore, after listening to Kuang Ye's words, Yang Qindong quickly counterattacked. Sai, it's just a title of duke. It's not like Prince Shiping was given the title of prince. There's no need to be so calculative. Hiss! A cold breath came from the bottom of his heart and went straight to his head. Kuang Yi widened his eyes and looked at Yang Qindong in disbelief. There was hesitation and doubt in his eyes, but more than that, there was fear and horror. This young man actually wanted the title of prince and envied Prince Mubin of Shiping. However, did he not know that since the establishment of the great Ming dynasty, Mubin was the only prince with a different surname who was still alive? There was only one prince after so many years. Yang Qindong actually wanted to be one of them. His courage and desire were beyond the reach of ordinary people. It was no wonder that the emperor was wary of him. for such an ambitious person. Even if Kuang Yi was in the emperor's position, he would also be wary of him. He might even do something regardless of the consequences. Kuang Yi was stunned. In Yang Qindong's eyes, he forced a smile on his pale face. Minister Kuang, it's just a joke. You don't believe it, do you? Haha, how could that be? This old man was just amazed by the courage of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Kuang Yi chuckled perfunctorily. However, in his heart he thought, who would believe that you are joking? How can some things be taken as a joke? In just a few words, Yang Qindong had already stated his expectations. This also made Kuang Yi realize that after using him last time, he threw him to the side and even sent someone to poison him. He was afraid that he had already hurt his feelings. If he wanted to use him to send troops, he would have to pay a heavy price. The position of prince was one of the requirements. Even though he had expected Yang Qindong to demand an exorbitant price when he invited him again, he did not expect such an outrageous request. At this moment, even Kuang Yi wanted to retreat. Today's trip was to see the condition of Yang Qindong's body. If possible, he wanted to test whether he could continue to lead the mercenaries to work for the great Ming dynasty. He originally thought that it would be difficult to achieve the second requirement. After all, it was a bit comical to talk about sending troops in front of a sick person. However, Yang Qindong's initiative allowed these two requirements to be met. It was just that the results were not very satisfactory. As if he knew that Kuang Yi's probing had achieved its goal, or perhaps Yang Qindong's body was really not good and he had reached his body's limit for receiving guests for so long. At this moment, he began to cough again and could not stop. This caused Hu Yan and the others, who were waiting outside the tent, to quickly rush in. Chapter 4:26. As soon as these people came in, Kuang Yi knew that he had to leave. He wanted to see if there were any other ways to solve the problem. But when he saw Yang Qindong's attitude and his current physical condition, he knew that it was meaningless to say anything more. Kuang Yi left. Just like when he came, Tiger's mane sent him out of the barracks. Yang Qindong stopped coughing, shook his head, and said, "It's hard work to pretend to be sick. I hope I can fool this old guy." His words made both Hu Yan and Madame Shui laugh. This was their husband. When he was serious, he was a little scary, but sometimes he was very cute. Yang Qindong did this to deceive Kuang Yi, and he also took the opportunity to put forward his request. In fact, Kuang Yi was indeed deceived. Yang Qindong's makeup skills were too good, or it could be said that the things in the warehouse were too good, so good that they could not be found in this era. That was why he could deceive everyone. "Teacher, how is Duke Zhongdan's condition?" On the way back to the city, Guaning asked in a low voice. When he saw Kuang Yi's gloomy face after leaving the barracks, he felt a little nervous. After all, a while ago he was not respectful to Yang Qindong, and even wanted to trick him. What he did was likely to ruin his teacher's plan, and he was a little worried about it. "He's really sick," Kuang Yi answered in a low voice, and the image of Yang Qindong's terminally ill flashed in his mind. Then, "I wonder if I can still lead troops into battle?" Guaning continued to ask in a low voice. This was the main point he was concerned about. He had already received the news that King of Min's faction had begun to deploy troops and generals while stabilizing the current results. They were preparing to expand the results of the war. As one of the occupied areas, Guangdong was obviously intolerable. That was to say, even if they did not take the initiative to attack, it would not be long before King Min took the initiative to deal with them. Lead the army to fight. Kuang Yi shook his head. Who knows? However, if you want him to fight, you have to agree to one of his conditions. You have to become a king, like Shiping Wang Mubin. Kuang Yi whispered when he saw that no one else was around. What? Crown king? Guan Ying almost couldn't hold himself back and yelled out. However, he quickly shut his mouth. From his expression, it could be seen that he was frightened as well. Who was Mu Bin? He was the descendant of the Mu family and had been loyal for generations. He was forced to be a king because he was going to pacify Yunnan this time. However, from the looks of it now, it did not seem to be of much use. This was because the commander-in-chief knew that the failure of Dongxing, this stupid teammate, had prevented him from unleashing his full strength. But in any case, Mu Bin, who was crowned as a king, was like a nail nailed to the back of King of Min, so that they could not attack Nanjing with all their strength. From this point of view, the crowning as a king had some effect. Who was Yang Qindong? Although he was also the descendant of the Yang family, and was also a loyal family, he just saved the leader of the mercenaries by coincidence. He did not have any real power in his hands, so why should he be a king? Of course, it was a bit too much to say why. After all, Yang Qindong saved Ingzong's life and defeated the Walla's invasion on behalf of Ingzong. Now he had the merit of pacifying the chaos in Guangdong, which was also a great achievement. But because of this, he could not be a king casually. Everything was because he was too powerful. He was so powerful that it was a little scary. Unlike Mu Bin, whose influence was only in Yunnan, he was nothing outside of Yunnan. Because of Yang Qindong's power, once he was crowned as a king, it was hard to predict what the consequences would be. Thinking of this, Guan Ying did not dare to say anything. And these were also seen by Kuang Yi. He could not help but sigh in his heart. There were some people in the great Ming dynasty who were crowned as kings, such as Zhongshan Prince Suda, Kaiping Prince Chang Yechen, Chiang Prince Li Wenzhong, Ningyi Prince Deng Yu, Dongou Prince Tang He, Qianing Prince Muing, and now Shiping Prince Mu Bin. But except for the last one, the others were all crowned as kings after they died. Yang Qindong was a living person. When he thought of living people, he could not help but think of Yang Qindong's weak body. Kuang Yi thought in his heart that perhaps this person would not live for long. In this case, crowning him as a king did not seem to be an unrealistic idea. Kuang Ye's heart became hesitant at first. When he was sure that Yang Qindong was seriously ill, the idea of crowning him as a king was born. Of course, he also knew that such a big matter could not be decided by himself. He still needed to ask the emperor for instructions. And so, after sending out the urgent letter yesterday, another urgent letter was sent out after he returned to the study of the Gaozhou government, Ping and Beijing, Japan. The imperial city of Japan was also called the Imperial Palace of the Great Inner City. It represented the highest power in Japan and was also the political, cultural, and economic center of the country. As the 102nd Emperor of Japan, Yanren was known as the Emperor of the Garden. This kind of name was very common in Japan. The people here were also very used to naming people after places, such as the foot of the mountain, the mouth of the river, the bridge, and so on. The Emperor of Japan was originally the most noble existence in this country. In fact, this was indeed the case to the outside world. Many orders were issued by the Emperor of the Garden and known to the people. But in reality, Yanren was more of a puppet-like existence. At least in some matters, he had to look at other people's faces and listen to other people's opinions before he could make the final decision. As a descendant of the royal family, Yanren naturally did not want to disgrace the name of the emperor. In private, he had been working hard to change this situation. This was why he sent his favorite daughter, Princess Junko, to the great Ming dynasty. At that time, the great Ming dynasty was very powerful to the outside world. At least, it was far from what Japan could compare to. They still had to look up to this big country in the east. After Princess Junko was sent out, some information came back through various channels. But most of it was about the princess's experience in the northern capital of the great Ming dynasty. The most mentioned person was a young man called Yang Qindong. The letter said that Yang Qindong was only in his early 20s, but he had already been conferred the title of duke and had a lot of influence in the great Ming dynasty. Regarding the records in this letter, Yanren naturally had a feeling of dislike towards Yang Qindong. It was not because of anything else. In his eyes, if such a person continued to develop, he would often become a powerful minister, just like General Ashikaga Yoshimasa. It was just that no matter whether Yan Rin liked Yang Qindong or not, when Shaolin suddenly came to the palace and brought back an important news, the emperor was finally shaken and had a better understanding of the name Yang Qindong. In a secret room deep in the palace, this place was not known to outsiders. Those who could come here were all very important people trusted by the emperor. Shaolin was able to appear here because of a piece of news he brought back, as well as the handwritten letter he took out from Princess Junko. When Junko left Japan, she and her father had agreed on some of the secret words in the letter. In other words, on the surface, there was nothing wrong with some of the letters. But only the father and daughter could see the authenticity of the letter and whether it was written under coercion. The letter that Shaolin brought was naturally out of Junko's sincerity, and the contents of the letter were not fake. This was something that Emperor Yenrin could see at a glance. It was precisely because this letter was real that Emperor Yenrin was even more shocked. After carefully reading the letter 3 times, he said with a serious face, "Little Lin Kuan, please tell me the truth about what you saw and heard." Huh. Shaolin nodded and then told him in detail how he met Yang Qindong for the first time with the princess, how he was chased and had to live in the Yang family village, and everything he saw later. It took more than an hour for Shaolin to finish telling the story. Then he looked at Yan Rin, who should be respected the most in Japan, and said, "Your Majesty, this Duke of Zhongdan is the most powerful and capable young man I have ever seen. It seems that there is nothing he can't do, and there seems to be nothing he can't solve." "Wait, you mean he's very powerful? How is he compared to the general?" Hearing this, Yan Rin interrupted and asked, "He should be stronger than him. After all, when he was young, the general wasn't as powerful as he is now." Shaolin only hesitated for a moment before giving the answer quickly. Swish, 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 swish. Yan Rin seemed to be very satisfied with such an answer and kept nodding his head. "Oh, right, tell me about the cannon." It was no wonder that he asked this question. A cannon was priced at 10 million taels of silver. Yan Rin believed that his daughter, Junko, knew what this amount of money meant, but she still wrote it in the letter and suggested to buy one. It was no wonder that Yan Rin valued it so much. This, in front of the emperor, Shaolin naturally didn't dare to hide anything. "Your Majesty, I have never seen the cannon when it was fired, but I have seen the terrible consequences after it was fired." Terrible consequences? Yes, it was like a barren land, as if the heavens were angry. Shaolin tried his best to describe the scene after he saw the cannon blast on Kirjing Street. However, Emperor Yenrin's expression changed again and again when he heard these words. In his mind, he seemed to have sketched out a very shocking scene, and this scene was soon installed in the general's mansion. It was as if a cannon blast could kill Ashikaga Yoshimasa, and he would regain control of the highest authority in Japan. "I'll raise the money now, and I'll leave the contact with the mercenaries to you. Don't let me down." Finally, Yenrin made up his mind. Although 10 million taels of silver was a huge burden to him, in order to regain control of the country, he agreed without hesitation. "Hai." Shaolin nodded excitedly. With such a heavy responsibility on his shoulders, he could imagine that once he succeeded, he would be put in an important position. By then he might even stand at the top of Japan. Chapter 4:27. The mercenary camp outside Gaozhou Prefecture. The Emperor of Japan agreed to buy cannons and prepared 10 million taels of silver for this purpose. The news had already been sent to him. After reading it, Yang Qindong only ordered everything to proceed according to plan and handed it over to Commander Gao Xiong to handle. He threw this piece of information aside. Compared to Japan, which was far away at sea, Yang Qindong was more concerned about the situation in front of him. He was more concerned about whether or not he could be crowned king. Originally, Yang Qindong did not have such extravagant hopes. He only thought about how to use war to expand his military strength and get more things he needed. After all, if Lung Feng wanted to develop, it would not be possible without a sufficient population base. He did not want to use outsiders and trusted the Han people more, so he could only set his sights on the Great Ming. Facts had also proven that war was indeed the best way to test the strength of an army. At the same time, it was also the best opportunity to expand the army. He had obtained so many soldiers and taels of silver just by wiping out a motley crew of yellow bandits with only a few 100,000 people. This made Yang Qindong see the benefits that war could bring to him. However, he did not expect that the situation in Yunnan was so critical that Yingzong Qijin threw aside the laws of the ancestors and gave Marquis Shiping the title of King of Shiping. One should not underestimate this title of king with a different surname. Once he had the identity of a king, he could open his own mansion and have his own army. Although the number of people could not exceed 3,000 for Yang Qindong, once he had this kind of power, there were probably not many places in the world that he could not go. There were too many benefits to becoming a king, so it was not an example. This made Yang Qindong very excited. However, he also knew that even if Mu Bin could be crowned king with a different surname, it was only a special event in a special period. It was not hereditary, so it was destined that the title of King of Shiping was only effective on Mu Bin. Otherwise, his descendants would not be able to enjoy such treatment. Even Mu Bin had so many backup plans when he was crowned king. If he wanted to be crowned king, it would be even more difficult. Not to mention that Zhu Qijin had always been afraid of him. In this regard, the two brothers, Zhu Qijin and Zhu Qiyu, had the same attitude. However, with the example before him, no matter how difficult it was, Yang Qindong had to fight for it. To him, this was definitely an opportunity. In the words of the commoners, if they missed this opportunity, they might not be able to find it again. With this goal in mind, when Kuang Yi came to visit him, he mentioned that he was very envious of Kuang Yi being conferred the title of king. At the same time, he pretended to be seriously ill in order to increase the chances of this matter becoming a reality. Of course, if he really wanted Zhu Qijin to relent, just doing this was not enough. In other words, the more complicated the situation on the battlefield was, the more danger the southern Ming Empire was in, and the higher the chances of success would be. Therefore, during these days, Yang Qindong had been paying attention to the movement of Prince of Min's faction. After waiting for days and nights, they finally made a move. The Miao people were the first to react. This time, the Prince of Min's faction was able to defeat the southern Ming army and progress at lightning speed. The Miao people's help was completely inseparable. It was because of the Miao family's courage to fight, kill, and charge that the southern Ming army was defeated and lost a large amount of territory and land in a very short period of time. At that time, there was no such thing as 56 ethnic groups being one family. As a minority, they were often limited from birth. Their birth meant that they would not have much success in their lives. Things like being high up in the imperial court, that was something that they did not even want to think about. As a result, each generation was worse than the previous generation. In addition to the bad living environment, the lives of the Miao people were getting worse day by day. It was not until Zhu Qijin established the southern Ming dynasty in Nanjing that he increased taxes in order to achieve his goal of recuperating faster. This made the Miao people, who did not have a good life to begin with, live an abyss of suffering under the heavy burden. Wherever there was oppression, there would be resistance. Just as the Miao family was suffering, the Prince of Min's messenger came and promised many benefits, which made some of the leaders of the Miao family tempted. After that, they started the war. When they left their hometown and went all the way to Guangdong, they finally knew what was called wealth. In comparison, it seemed that their previous lives were too poor. Under sudden wealth, it would often make a person dizzy and change their way of doing things. This was the case for the Miao army. They didn't have to spend much effort to take down a few cities. After grabbing a lot of good things, the greed in their hearts couldn't be suppressed. Gradually, they started to like the feeling of looting. The main force of the Prince of Min's faction was still digesting the cities in their hands and constantly recruiting soldiers to consolidate their strength. When the Jiaoji army was taking down cities, they did not forget to transfer good things and some people to their own country. Only the Miao army did not care about cities and did not think about conquering the world. They were more interested in the benefits in front of them. It could be said that they were short-sighted or unambitious. In short, they were the fiercest when it came to attacking cities. Often, after taking down a city, they would loot for a few days. Then they would leave the city and move on to a new target, continuing the pace of attacking cities. As they looted and moved, it was the Miao family who had the least number of people that caused the most damage. In less than a month, they had destroyed more than a dozen cities and state capitals, and the number of people affected by the disaster had reached more than 1 million. The Miao army, which was divided into several groups, was like a swarm of locusts. Wherever they went, the crops would be destroyed and the people would be displaced. Supposedly, the south of the great Ming dynasty had not experienced any wars for many years. The people were still rich. If it were other armies that came here, it would not be difficult to raise military provisions. However, the bad thing was that the people who came were Miao people. Not only did they snatch food, money, and women, they also burned the things that they could not eat. It was as if they were venting their poor lives over the years. Such actions naturally caused the number of victims in Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong provinces to increase. Later on, when many people found out about the Miao army's actions, they did not wait for the Miao army to attack and left their homes with their families. Although people were not willing to leave the hometown that they had lived in for a long time, compared to being able to live, more people chose to leave home. Only a portion of the elderly who were old and had bad legs chose to stay. They looked like they would die in their hometown, even if they died. The disaster of the Miao army was not inferior to the disaster of the great Ming dynasty. This point was quickly reached and was publicly announced in the main hall of the southern Ming dynasty. Wang Zue and a few other senior officials also wrote to the emperor, requesting that the emperor send troops to deal with the Miao army to save the people from this disaster. Some of these people were sincerely loyal to the country, and some were because their ancestral homes were in the 3 provinces. Among them, there were some officials who were unlucky. Their hometowns were occupied, and their fields were occupied by the Miao army. In their anger, they naturally hoped that the emperor would send troops to encircle them and help them regain everything that they had lost. There were more and more memorials asking for troops, covering the entire dragon table. Zhu Qijin's expression also became more and more ugly. How could he not want to send troops to deal with the rebellion? But first, he had to have the strength to do so. The great Ming dynasty, especially the south, had not seen soldiers for a long time. From the results of Kuang Ye's previous inspection, after many years of recuperation, some of the southern Ming dynasty guards had some soldiers that could be used. However, they had their own mission. Guarding their own territory was their heavy responsibility. If they were to transfer these soldiers now and gather them to deal with the king of Min's rebellion, if there were too few people, there would be no effect on the overall situation. If there were too many people, the rear would be empty and there would be new rebellions. If that was the case, the southwest would change and the southeast would have trouble. Then the southern Ming regime would be in danger, robbing the east wall to pay the west wall. If the west wall collapsed because of this, the gains would not make up for the losses. But if they did not transfer troops, they would not be able to solve the problem at hand. Although the Ministry of War had already started to recruit soldiers, it still needed a certain amount of time. At this time, Kuang Ye's second urgent report was sent to Zhu Qijin's desk. This report was about yesterday's matter of the brocade guard. After Wei Guang committed suicide, it emphasized that Yang Qindong was poisoned and that it was important to send troops to learn from Mu Bin and be crowned king. Trash, a bunch of trash. In the throne room, Zhu Qijin, who had read the report, raised his hand and threw the urgent report to the head eunuch Chao Jixiang, who was serving him. Your Majesty, please calm down. Take care of your dragon body." Chao Jixiang still didn't know what had happened, so he knelt down on the ground with a frightened look. Calm down, calm down. Every day, you only know how to calm down my anger, but you have to do something that makes me happy." That Wei Guang, not only did he fail to kill Mu Bin, but he also admitted everything. Not only did he cause me to be labeled as a meritorious official, but now he wants the throne for me. Tell me, should I give it to him or not? Zhu Qijin, whose face was livid, roared and stared at Chao Jixiang to express his dissatisfaction. Chao Jixiang's face instantly paled. "Your Majesty, does Yang Qindong want to be crowned king? Who else could it be other than him?" Zhu Qijin's voice implied this fact. "That won't do." Hearing this, Chao Jixiang's eyes kept darting around as he spoke. Hearing Chao Jixiang say no, Zhu Qijin became interested. "My dear minister, why do you say no?" Chao Jixiang, who was kneeling on the ground, quickly crawled forward and came to Zhu Qijin's feet. He raised his head and said with a loyal expression, "Your Majesty, it's a rule set by our ancestors that people with different surnames cannot be crowned king. King Shiping is an exception, but it turns out that it's not very useful to be crowned king with different surnames. Moreover, if we give it to whoever wants it, the world will be in chaos. Once the world is at peace, how will we deal with them? I'm afraid we can't get rid of them." Chapter 428. Chao Jixiang's voice was still echoing in Zhu Qijin's ears, but the unlucky Emperor Ingzong didn't say anything. From the moment Mu Bin became the king of Shiping, he knew that some things were out of his control. Once he was bestowed the title of prince, it was equivalent to having his own prince's mansion and even his own guard army. Although the number of people could not be too large, the mountain was high and the emperor was far away. Who knew if there was a restless heart under the surface of obedience? Especially a king who became a king by fighting, who had killed a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, had more specific military strength that couldn't be underestimated. But if he wasn't a king, how could they do their best? Marquis Mu Bin of Shiping was already the boss of Yunnan. There was nothing left to be conferred, nothing to be rewarded. If he wanted to use him as a bystander, there was no other way except for this move. He had no choice but to do this, although the effect was not very good. In any case, with Mu Bin watching from the rear, it also took a lot of energy from King Min's side, so they couldn't attack the hinterland of the south. A king's title only played a role of restraint. Zhu Qijin was a little dissatisfied in his heart, but what could he do? He was the emperor, the son of heaven. But if he didn't have enough strength, how many people would listen to him? For the emperor, being a king for the sake of fighting was tantamount to giving away a part of his power, which might be regarded as a disgrace. At the very least, none of his ancestors had ever done such a thing, but it was still better than being forced to perish. If he persisted for the sake of face and finally let King Min's side come to Nanjing, at that time he would really be a sinner of the Zhu family, and he would have no face to see his ancestors. Thinking that the current situation was so erosive and difficult, Zhu Qijin began to seriously consider what Kuang Yi said about Yang Qindong's proposal. "My dear minister, how is Duke Zhongdan's health? Also, I asked you to find a way to contact the mercenaries. Is there any progress?" When these things were mentioned, Chao Jixiang's face became very ugly. He, who was originally clamoring that he couldn't be conferred the title of king, quickly lowered his head and said, "Your Majesty, please calm down. This subject is incompetent." Chao Jixiang couldn't be blamed for saying that. Whether it was Yang Qindong or the mercenaries, the embroidered uniform guard hadn't made any progress in such a long time. Needless to say, the mercenaries had perfect military discipline. Furthermore, the soldiers who were qualified to serve in Crimson City had all been seriously tested in terms of loyalty. In addition, they did not go out on their own, so it was even more difficult for outsiders to find out about them. Even though the embroidered uniform guards seemed to be everywhere, they were unable to do anything in the face of such a disciplined army. Naturally, it was difficult for them to achieve any results. As for Yang Qindong's place, it was heavily guarded. Even the auxiliary troops could not get close. Only the elite cold vanguard, who had gone through many trials and tribulations, had the right to guard outside. Not to mention, there were also the first and second guards, the elites of the elites. Under such heavy protection, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to investigate Yang Qindong's condition. The embroidered uniform guard had sent out many people, but most of them returned empty-handed. On the contrary, quite a few of them had gone missing. Chao Jixiang's words of incompetence expressed his helplessness toward Yang Qindong and the mercenaries. His words enraged Zhu Qijin once again. Incompetent, incompetent. Do you not know what else to say other than this? Scram, scram. Yes, yes. Seeing that Zhu Qijin was enraged again, Chao Jixiang, who knew that accompanying a monarch was like accompanying a tiger, immediately knelt and left. Zhu Qijin was the emperor of the great Ming dynasty, second only to one and above all. He had inherited the legacy of his ancestors, but at the same time he had also inherited his ancestors' temperament, which was capricious. Who knew if he would punish Chao Jixiang in a fit of rage? Chao Jixiang left the hall, and the other eunuchs lowered their heads, not daring to speak. Not long after, a heavy sigh filled the hall. No one knew what the so-called true dragon, the son of heaven, was thinking at this moment. Gaozhou Prefecture. The Minister of War, Kuang Yi, sent 2 urgent secret letters to Emperor Yingzong, but he did not receive any reply even after a long time. At this time, extremely bad news spread over. The leader of the Heavenly Fortress camp, Miao Jinlong, who was given the title of Marquis by the Ming king, was leading 80,000 troops from the Nanning prefecture. The moment Kuang Yi received the news, he hurriedly summoned his generals to the front of the hall. At this moment, Ma Wei, Guan Ying Yuguang, and the other generals all had ugly expressions. Below the hall, the scout general was reporting the battle reports he had received. Miao Jinlong's troops are very good at fighting. In terms of strength, they are second only to Yang Wenbo of the Dumeng stronghold. Since the start of the war, they had already taken over 4 cities and cities. Among them, the number of small counties that they had taken over was uncountable. Their army had also expanded from 10,000 people to 80,000 now. They are currently attacking the Lianzhou prefecture and are not far from us. How many people are there in the Lianzhou prefecture? Kuang Yi asked directly. Only 1,000. The scout general did not even dare to raise his head. Hiss! Kuang Yi, who took in a cold breath, knew that Lianzhou could not be defended. 1,000 against 80,000, the result could be imagined. Report. Right at this moment, another scout entered the hall and whispered something into the ears of the general, who was kneeling on the ground. The scout general's expression changed again and again. He then waved his hand and waited for his subordinates to leave. He said with a panicked expression, "I just received news that the general of the Lianzhou prefecture has surrendered." What? Kuang Yi, who had suddenly heard the latest battle report, staggered and fell to the side before losing his balance. Luckily, Guanning reacted quickly and stretched out his hands to catch him. He also anxiously shouted, "Teacher, teacher, are you okay?" I'm fine. Kuang Yi, who took in a strong breath, his chest heaved up and down a few times. Then he steadied himself and waved his hand at Guanning. Then he angrily scolded, "Bastards, a bunch of bastards." They received the kindness of the emperor and did not think of repaying it. They should be killed, their families should be wiped out, and their families should be wiped out. Kuang Yi angrily scolded. Unfortunately, the general of the Lianzhou prefecture could not hear him. Even if he heard it, he would not be afraid. After all, he had already surrendered. Who knew how long the South Ming could last? "Teacher, please calm down. Now that the Lianzhou prefecture has fallen, The next target will probably be our Gaozhou prefecture. As for how to deal with it, I need teacher to think. Guanyin saw that Kuang Yi could stand up on his own and took 2 steps back. Deal with it? What else can we do? We have to defend the Gaozhou prefecture to the death. With me here, we will not let these traitors take a step forward. Even though savage Kuang was old, his voice was like thunder. Kuang Yi had made the decision to defend the city to the death. As a student, Guanyin immediately cupped his hands and said, "Student is willing to follow teacher and defend the Gaozhou prefecture to the death." Guanying's words were heard by Ma Wei and Yu Guang. The two exchanged a glance before cupping their fists and saying, "We will follow the orders of the minister and defend Gaozhou prefecture to the death. We will fight to the death and not retreat." Ma Wei and Yu Guang did not have a choice. Even though they were in the Gaozhou prefecture, their families were not here. Their original place of defense was not Gaozhou. If they really surrendered like the Lianzhou prefecture general, once the news spread, their families would not be able to survive. Even if it was for the safety of their families, they had no other choice. Furthermore, with the minister of the Ministry of War here, even if they wanted to surrender, they had to be able to control the army. Hearing the words of the generals, Kuang Ye's expression became better. Good. His Majesty will definitely know of your loyalty. After we defeat the enemy this time, this official will definitely ask for rewards for all of you. Thank you, Minister. Guanyin and the other two lowered their heads and cupped their hands. However, whether or not they would really listen to this so-called request for merit was another matter altogether. First, they agreed. Then, Kuang Yi wrote an urgent letter to be sent to Nanjing. After reporting the situation here, he looked at Guanyin and the other two and said, "Immediately seal the city. At the same time, gather the youths in the city and help the soldiers defend the city." In the Gaozhou prefecture, there were at least 40,000 people. Among them, there were 5,000 youths. If used well, it would be a significant force. "Teacher, should we inform the Duke of Loyalty and ask him to come to the city to help us defend the city?" When Guanyin saw that Kuang Yi didn't mention Yang Qindong, he thought that Kuang Yi was too anxious to remember, so he reminded him. "Sai, we can just send someone to inform them. However, if they are not willing to enter the city, we cannot force them." Kuang Yi thought about Yang Qindong's request and shook his head as he said, half-heartedly. He didn't think that the little fox Yang Qindong would be willing to help him defend Gaozhou prefecture before he received a confirmation. Outside the Gaozhou prefecture, in the mercenary camp near the Liezhou prefecture, the battle report from the front line had already been sent here. Yang Qindong naturally knew that Miao Jinlong had led the troops here. "Ah, they are finally here?" Yang Qindong's attitude was completely different from Kuang Ye's. When he heard this, he didn't panic at all. Instead, he looked as if he already knew this would happen. "Young master, are we going to beat them up?" Hu Meng, who was standing at the side, asked excitedly. From his words, it was not whether they should fight or not, but whether they should beat them up. Just this point alone showed how confident he was in winning. Actually, it was not only Tiger's Mane. The 7,000 young army soldiers all thought the same. The auxiliary soldiers of the Cold Front were even more so. With their advanced weapons, they could look down on the world and not reject any strong enemy. Even the temporary auxiliary soldiers were full of confidence after being trained for such a long time and learning excellent tactics. They only wanted to gain military merits in one battle and become an auxiliary soldier. They wanted to become a member of the elite Cold Vanguard as soon as possible and be envied by everyone. Chapter 429. Why do we have to fight? Yang Qindong tilted his head and asked after hearing Tiger's Mane's words. Tiger's Mane didn't know how to answer the young master's question. Fortunately, Yang Qindong didn't point at him to answer. Instead, he said slowly young master's goal was to force Zhu Qijin to bow his head. Isn't the appearance of these people the best time to do so? If we chase them away right away, the problem will be solved. How can we force them to bow? Yes, young master is right. Tiger's mane is too naive. Tiger's mane was smart. After being pointed out by Yang Qindong, he understood everything and immediately replied, It's good that you know. Pass down the order. The camp will be in a defensive formation. Without orders, no one is allowed to leave the camp. Also, inform the logistics to prepare enough food and be prepared for a long standoff. Yang Qindong knew that Tiger's mane wasn't the only one who wanted to send out troops. He was afraid that all the officers would have the same idea. Thus, he passed down the order. Once a real and effective military order was formed, Lung Feng, who prioritized obeying orders, knew what to do. Just as Yang Qindong was passing down the order, Guanning came to the camp as a representative of Nanming. He wanted to meet Yang Qindong and invite him to Gaozhou Prefecture to avoid trouble. As expected, Guanning didn't even see Yang Qindong's face before Tiger's mane sent him away. My young master's condition has worsened. He is not fit for any exercise. We appreciate Master Guan's kindness. We will stay here and guard the young master's body. When he recovers, we will leave. These words left Guanning speechless. He could only hope that after the Miao army arrived and failed to take down Gaozhou Prefecture, they would make an example out of these mercenaries. This way they could just sit back and watch the tigers fight. Gaozhou Prefecture and Yang Qindong's troops had all made defensive preparations. 3 days later, Miao Jinlong's 80,000 soldiers finally appeared in the southwest. Miao Jinlong was from the Miao tribe and was born in a big family. He had practiced martial arts since he was young and was familiar with the art of war. He had also seen many instances of the Ming dynasty's army bullying the Miao people. He had always wanted to fight for the rights of the Miao people one day and hold his head high. However, the great Ming dynasty was too powerful. How could the Miao tribe, who had a weak population and territory, contend against them? He originally thought that this was just a childhood dream that he would never be able to realize in his lifetime. But who knew that the situation changed so quickly? The prosperous great Ming dynasty was divided into two. Then the king of Min raised his army. Miao Jinlong, who had been waiting, knew that the opportunity had come. He rose in revolt and became the first group of people in the Miao tribe to support the king of Min. He expressed his stance early and took practical actions. After a while, he gained the favor of the king of Min, Miao Jinlong, who was conferred the title of Marquis, led 10,000 Miao soldiers, and was unstoppable. After winning every battle, the army grew stronger and stronger. Now, they had 80,000 soldiers and became a very important force in the king of Min's faction. Some things, if you don't do it, you won't know. Maybe it was because he had been trapped in the Miao tribe for a long time. Miao Jinlong had always thought highly of the Ming dynasty. However, along the way, he did not meet any opponents. Often, when the army arrived, the city would fall by itself. Countless gold, silver, treasures, land, and beauties were at his fingertips. He finally saw what was called a real life, what was called a life of enjoyment. He also saw how the Ming dynasty, which was praised by others, could not withstand a single blow. After experiencing more, his horizons were broadened. Naturally, his heart grew bigger. Just as the king of Min's main force was still consolidating and absorbing the fruits of victory, Miao Jinlong could no longer hold back. After asking for instructions, he led the 80,000 soldiers and started to sweep through the entire Guangdong. Attacking the Lianzhou prefecture was just the beginning. His goal was to enter Gaozhou, Laizhou, Guanghai guards, and the southwest of the Guangzhou prefecture from Lianzhou. He wanted to be the vanguard to cooperate with the king of Min's main force to attack the Guangzhou prefecture. Lianzhou won the battle, and the Lianzhou general surrendered and opened the city. This seemed to be a good start. Miao Jinlong was overjoyed and led his troops to seize the city for a day. On the second day, he went straight to Gaozhou prefecture. In his eyes, Guang Prefecture was the only place to rest. The other prefectures were just steps to wealth and power. It was because of this idea that when the troops arrived at the Gaozhou Prefecture, he sent people as usual to persuade them to surrender. The people were sent out, but only corpses returned. Guanning was ordered to kill the messenger with an arrow. This is so infuriating. How dare you kill the messenger? Men, surround the city, attack the city. When Miao Jinlong saw the messenger's corpse, he could not help but be furious. He immediately ordered to prepare to attack the city. My king, please calm down. Just as the other generals in the tent were enraged and were about to fight to be the vanguard, a voice rang out in the tent. Then a man dressed in a long gown and dressed like a scholar walked out from the ranks. Mr. Zhou. Seeing the person who walked out, Miao Jinlong furrowed his brows. Then he relaxed and asked kindly, Mister, why are you stopping me from sending troops? It is for the good of my king and all the generals. The man called Mr. Zhou said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Mr. Zhou's original name was Zoda. He was originally from Yunnan. Because he once offended a steward of the Marquis sheeping house, he was stripped of his scholar status. In a fit of anger, he went to where the Miao people lived and married into their family, becoming the son-in-law of the Miao family. Because he was literate and knowledgeable, he was chosen by Miao Jinlong and kept by his side. Zoda was worthy of being called a scholar. He had contributed a lot to Miao Jinlong's plan along the way. Even when the Min king sent people to contact them, he was the first to stand up and support them. Zhou did not only focus on attacking, but also on attacking the heart. It was because of this that when he attacked the Lianzhou house, he did not lose a single soldier and obtained a city. All of this made Miao Jinlong admire him. In addition, this person had been in the Miao family for 10 years and even had a few children. There was no problem with his loyalty, and he was very trusted. When he saw that it was this person who stood out, he was not angry. Instead, he asked kindly, Let's hear it. Hearing that it was for his own good, Miao Jinlong asked with interest. Facing Miao Jinlong's amiable attitude and the angry expressions of the other generals, Zoda was neither servile nor overbearing. With a calm expression, he said, My king, generals, you must remember that our ally in Guangdong, Huang Yuliang, was completely wiped out, right? Of course. Miao Jinlong nodded his head. Due to his identity, he had never met young Master Huang or even his messenger. However, he knew that they had an ally in Guangdong. It was because of this ally that they were able to reduce the pressure on them in Yunnan, allowing them to achieve great things. Then do you know why young Master Huang was defeated? Let me tell you. He was defeated by the Ming army in front of you, Zoda said with a very firm tone. The reason he knew this was mainly because he was good at gathering information. He was not like the ordinary Miao soldiers who only knew how to fight and fight. There was such a thing. Miao Jinlong, who was originally curious about what Zoda would say, could not help but change his expression when he heard this. He finally understood why Zoda did not agree to him attacking the city. So what if there is? Miao Jinlong did not speak, but it did not mean that his generals were afraid of anything. Among them, General Zhang Tseng said with a fearless tone, That only proves that young Master Huang is too weak. If it were our Miao soldiers, we would definitely make the Southern Ming army cry for their parents on the battlefield and know how powerful we are. That's right, that's right. After the other generals heard Zhang Tseng's words, they all agreed. During this period of time, they had dealt with and fought with the Southern Ming army. However, the facts proved that this was just an army that looked strong on the outside but had ordinary combat strength. There was nothing to be afraid of. Huang Yuliang's defeat was definitely due to his own lack of strength. No, you are all wrong. Faced with the unanimous opinion of so many generals, Zoda refuted with the strength of a weak scholar. You all have only won a few battles, but you do not know that there is always someone stronger. Why don't you think about it? Since the Ming dynasty was able to conquer such a large country, how could they be weak? The reason why we aren't a match for them now is because our tempo is too fast. They weren't prepared and weren't able to adapt. However, once they are given enough time to deploy their troops, who can guarantee that we will continue to win? Not to mention, the ones who defeated young Master Huang weren't the Southern Ming Empire's army, but the most mysterious mercenaries that they spent a large sum of money to hire. Zhou did indeed understand a lot. This was also related to the education he received. It was precisely because he had read more books that he naturally had more knowledge and had more considerations. For example, studying the opponent was something that must be done. Mercenary army? When the generals heard this new name for the first time, they all looked at each other with a puzzled expression. Zhou did not expect them to understand anything. He only needed to tell them what he knew. As for what to do next, whether or not they had to continue attacking the city, it was not something that he could decide. Yes, it is the mercenary army. It was this army that once saved the life of the Southern Ming Emperor, Ingzong's life on the battlefield. It was also this army that defeated the Walla cavalry that wanted to enter the capital of Baiming. It was also this army that defeated young Master Huang, who was very influential in Guangdong. These are their achievements after they made their debut. He spoke truthfully about everything that he knew. Then Zhou continued, "If we want to attack the city, we will definitely not be able to avoid them. How much confidence do we have? As for where to go, I asked my king and the generals to discuss this." Chapter 430. Zhou just shut his mouth and did not want to argue with anyone about this matter. He was originally a Han Chinese, but because he was treated unfairly and could not survive, he came to the Miao tribe and became the son-in-law of the Miao tribe. A person like him actually had a very low social status. He couldn't even be considered the head of a family. How many people would think highly of him? If Miao Jinlong did not see that he did have some ability and put him in an important position, he would not be qualified to enter the tent for discussion, let alone argue with others. Zhou just shut his mouth, which made the others unable to find an object to argue with for a while. They all looked at King Miao Jinlong. The Miao tribe also had a very strict hierarchy, especially when it came to major matters, such as the deployment of troops on the battlefield. The king's order was the final order. Everyone's eyes were on him, which made Miao Jinlong silent, although it seemed that the journey was very smooth and the army was also growing step by step. From the original 10,000 people to the current 80,000 people, it was a strong army. However, no one knew better than Miao Jinlong about his own strength. The so-called expansion of the army was just these soldiers who were forced to join. Most of them joined the army to fill their stomachs. Unlike the Miao family that he led in the beginning, they were born to conquer the world and be proud of the heroes. They did not even have a goal. Such an army could only fight a smooth battle. Once they encountered a tough opponent, they were likely to be heavily injured or even defeated. It was possible that they could lose their lives. The great Ming dynasty could occupy the world until now. If it was said that they did not have a capable army, even Miao Jinlong himself would not believe it. Just like now, didn't they encounter one? A head-on clash was far from what he wanted to see. Where there were people, there would be underworld. This saying was also applicable in the army. For any organization, no matter what the intention was, as long as time passed, factions would appear. It was something that could not be stopped. Unless the system was very strict, if there was a great soul leading the army, these problems could be suppressed. Just like the king of Min's faction now. Everyone treated the king of Min as the core. But it was undeniable that which general did not have their own thoughts? If you want to be respected by others, if you want to share the benefits, the prerequisite is to have enough strength. Only then will others respect you, value you, and not neglect you. How to expand their own strength while winning the battle, or at least to preserve their own strength, became the most important thing in the eyes of the kings. If everything was as Zoda said, and the Ming army in front of them and the mercenaries in front of them were very powerful, then choosing such a tough opponent was originally an unwise thing. What was the meaning of winning if they used up all their forces and severely injured the enemy? It was just making a wedding dress for others. It was because of this desire to preserve their strength that Miao Jinlong listened to Zoda's words. He then said to the generals looking at him, "Forget it. Since the Ming army in front of us is not so easy to deal with, we do not need to make too many sacrifices. We will just surround them and wait for their morale to drop and surrender. How about this? We will first move out of Laizhou Prefecture and take the nearby cities. General Zhang Zhang, listen up. I will give you 10,000 troops. Go around Gaozhou Prefecture and take Laizhou City. Remember, if the Ming army does not take the initiative to stop you, do not casually provoke them. Think about the big picture, understand?" Miao Jinlong finally gave the order. He listened to Zoda's suggestion and did not take a head-on approach. Instead, he only surrounded the city and lowered the enemy's morale first. Then he would have the opportunity to take Gaozhou Prefecture without bloodshed and complete his strategic mission. After the king gave the order, General Zhang Tsung stepped out to receive it. Not long after, the 10,000 Miao family soldiers rushed out of the camp and went around the border of Gaozhou Prefecture, heading straight for Laizhou Prefecture in the south. After the Miao army arrived, they did not immediately attack the city. Instead, they acted as if they were going to surround the city. This caused General Yu Guang, who had already prepared to defend Gaozhou City, to be puzzled. However, he soon found out from General Wei that it was probably because the enemy was afraid of the mercenaries. Yu Guang was still thinking about how powerful the mercenaries were. Just their name alone was enough to scare people into not daring to make a move. The Miao army actually started to move again. They went straight from Gaozhou Prefecture to the mercenaries' Camp 5, Li South. Don't tell me they want to attack the mercenaries first, but it seems like they only have 10,000 troops. Is that even useful? The deputy general beside Yu Guang voiced out his doubts while revealing an expression of disbelief. Idiot, they are probably going to attack Laizhou Prefecture. Yu Guang glared at the deputy general beside him with an expression that said, "You are really stupid." Then he quickly sent someone to report this news to the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, who was waiting in the government office. 5 li south of Gaozhou Prefecture, the mercenaries' camp. When the scouts noticed that the Miao army was moving towards their camp, they quickly reported it. Tiger's Mane did not dare to delay after hearing the news. He ordered Luo Pe and the others to prepare for battle while rushing to the large tent where the young master was resting. At this moment, Yang Qindong was very satisfied. He was enjoying the fruits that the two ladies fed him. If he wanted to eat bananas, he would have them peeled and delivered to his mouth. If he wanted to eat grapes, he would have them washed and delivered to his mouth. Even if he wanted to eat apples, he would have them peeled and delivered to his mouth. With beauties by his side and delicious food in front of him, Yang Qindong could not help but feel like he was not thinking about the world anymore. Fortunately, in his previous life, in order to complete all kinds of missions, he had taken on all kinds of roles. In order to complete the missions, he had to act like he was. He could really endure hardships and enjoy blessings. Everything in front of him was just child's play. He could not lose Yang Qindong's nature. Outside the large tent, hurried footsteps could be heard, followed by Tiger's Mane's anxious voice. "Young master, the Miao army is moving. They are rushing towards our direction." Although his voice was a little hurried, he was not panicked. It was obvious that Yang Qindong had already prepared for this kind of situation. It was very simple. If someone attacked, then they just had to fight back. After Tiger's Mane reported, he respectfully stood in place. After a few breaths of time, the large tent was opened from the inside. Yang Qindong, dressed in green, walked out with a serious expression. "Let's go. We will go take a look at this Miao army." The intelligence had described the Miao people and the Miao army more than once, but he had never seen them with his own eyes. With the idea of knowing oneself and knowing one's enemy, Yang Qindong decided to personally take a look. The Miao army was indeed heading straight for the mercenaries' camp. When they were only 2 li away, they suddenly turned and passed by. This obviously provocative action caused many of the cold vanguard soldiers, who had already gripped their spears, to glare angrily. Some of the soldiers even turned their heads to look at the platoon leaders and company commanders beside them. Their intention to fight was very obvious. Ever since the mercenaries were established, they had shocked the world with a single brilliant feat. What the people of the great Ming dynasty knew was that they first saved Emperor Ingzong on the battlefield, then defeated Walla's elite cavalry, then fought bravely against the Huang bandits and quelled the rebellion in Guangdong. Each and every one of them had the aura of being invincible the moment Lung Feng was unleashed. How could such a proud army allow others to provoke them? Keep your eyes on the target. Without orders, no one is to act rashly. Otherwise, prepare to retire early. The company commanders and platoon leaders, who were being stared at by those cold gazes, naturally felt the pressure. They were extremely dissatisfied, but it was the duty of a soldier to obey orders. This was especially true for those who joined the cold front. Obeying orders was an extremely important task for them. Even if there were no orders from above, they could not evade the enemy's spear, even if it pierced their chest. This was the most basic requirement to become an iron army, a strong army. Without orders to attack, the cold front, including some of the auxiliary soldiers who were ready for the second attack, could only watch as the 10,000-strong Miao army brushed past them. Speaking of which, the distance between the two sides was only about 300 meters. Those with good eyesight could even see the facial features of the other side. Therefore, they could see the mocking gazes of the Miao soldiers. "General, it seems like these so-called mercenaries are nothing more than this. We are already so close to them, but I don't see a single brave soldier daring to rush out of the camp to find trouble with us. It seems like they don't live up to their name." Some of the junior leaders in the Miao army gathered together and laughed. General Zhang Zeng, who was riding on a horse and walking in the middle of the group, also laughed when he heard the discussion of his subordinates. "That's right, they don't even have the courage to walk out of the camp. In my eyes, they are just a bunch of cowards. Once we take down Laizhou Prefecture, I will naturally tell the king to start with these mercenaries. Ha ha ha! I want to see what that scholar Zhou has to say when the time comes." "General, you're wise." The group of junior leaders hurriedly flattered. Following that, the 10,000-strong Miao soldiers walked past the mercenaries' camp with high morale. Each of them seemed to walk with their heads held high, as if they were extremely arrogant. "Young master, it seems like they don't have any intentions of attacking us. They are going to Laizhou Prefecture. However, there is no one there. The city is also empty. What are they going to do there?" Hu Mang watched as the 10,000 Miao soldiers walked past the front of the military camp. After walking for 2 hours in a grandiose manner, he saw through their purpose. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.